will modernise rights and improve conditions. The Office for Clean Energy Jobs engages unions to ensure renewable energy jobs support economic growth, the net zero transition and workers moving from carbon-intensive sectors.
Mr
Speaker, many of my constituents in Hales Owen work in energy-intensive industries like forges and heavy manufacturing. The government is rightly supporting these industries to become more energy efficient, but workers need new skills as well as skills in the many new jobs in the renewable energy sector. As they make this transition, how is the department supporting workers in the West Midlands get the right skills for these new industries?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this point, and supporting workers in energy-intensive industries is essential as we transition our economy. The Government will provide over £1.2 billion per year in skills funding by 2028-29, supporting training in renewables, low-carbon construction and advanced engineering. We're also investing over £100 million over 3 years to develop engineering skills in England and launching new technical excellence colleges to make sure that training stays aligned with employers' needs. And we'll push forward on the clean energy workforce strategy this year.
Question 2, Mr Speaker.
The industrial strategy published last month set out our plans to build clean energy supply chains in the UK, including a new £1 billion fund through GB Energy to partner with the private sector to create jobs in Britain, and the new clean industry bonus, which has the potential to unleash billions of private investment in offshore wind supply chains. We're determined the clean energy future is made in Britain.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The power cables over the Tyne are a barrier to businesses securing work for large renewable energy structures, which risk the possible net GVA benefits up to £1.2 billion. It's been proposed that the removal of the cables will be completed in 2032. Will the Secretary of State help me push for this to be brought forward so that Tyneside isn't held back in the global race for green jobs?
Well, can I first congratulate my honourable friend for being such a brilliant champion of the Port of Tyne and what it offers. And I think she is right to draw attention to this important issue. Approval of any works to reroute the line is a matter for Ofgem, but we stand ready to engage with her and indeed Ofgem to try and bring this forward. And I suggest that my honourable friend, the Energy Minister, meets with her to discuss this important issue.
Thank you,
Mr Speaker. Despite the growing need for green jobs, and we are all in favour, obviously, of making sure we have the green jobs, fewer than 1 in 10 employees receive any dedicated green skills training, according to an Ovo Energy survey. So what can we do to support businesses, and what can the government do to really accelerate that important training programme in all businesses where we need green jobs?
I think the Honourable Lady raises a really important issue, Mr Speaker, and later on this year we're going to be publishing a clean energy skills plan to address precisely this question. How do we make sure that we equip workers with the skills they need to take advantage of these jobs? This is something that is being led by my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, in the work that she is doing with Skills England. But there's a whole range of things that we can do. And for the first time, government will publish what the skills needs are for clean energy jobs and how we meet them. And I think that's going to be an important step forward.
Dr. Military.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As people fly off for their summer holidays, the chances are the steel in the aeroplane's engine comes from the Stocksbridge Speciality Steels plant in my constituency. I'm hopeful about the news that Liberty Steel, who own this site, has attracted potential investors for this asset, which is essential to our national security and with opportunities for net zero infrastructure, including wind turbines. However, uncertainty around the firm means pensions have not been paid to the skilled workforce there for 10 months, causing significant worry and anxiety for the 600 local steelworkers there. What reassurances can the Minister provide to Stocksbridge steelworkers on how the outstanding pension contributions will be paid, including in any future new ownership arrangements?
Well, I think my honourable friend raises a really, really important issue about her constituency and the steel industry. And I'd say two things. One, what this government has done, which I'm afraid was not done previously, is set up a dedicated fund for steel to be able to make the green transition. This is something that we talked about in opposition, and we're now actually delivering billions of pounds to help the steel industry transition. On the specific issues of pensions that she raises, I will take that issue up with my right honourable friend, the Trade and Business Secretary.
Graham Leopard.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The workers of Grangemouth deserved far better than they got from the Labour Government. And to add insult to injury, they have had to watch them pull out all the stops for Scunthorpe and Prax Lindsay. In a written answer to me, the Minister refused to confirm how much money the UK Government had spent to continue operations at Lindsay. So will he now come clean and tell us what is the price they are willing to pay to save jobs in England that they weren't willing to pay to save Grangemouth in Scotland?
I mean, the honourable gentleman is so wide of the mark, it's unbelievable. This is an issue. The Grangemouth closure was foreshadowed before this government came to power. We have worked hand in glove with his colleagues in the Scottish Government all the way along. Myself and Gillian Martin have been working on it. And for him to try and make party politics out of this issue is frankly a disgrace.
Shadow Secretary of State Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The British oil and gas industry is a resilient sector. It has to be, given this government's actions over the past year, and it does take a lot to shock it. But shocked it was on the 2nd of July when, sadly, the Energy Minister claimed to the Scottish Affairs Committee that there was, and I quote, no material difference between oil and gas imports and production from the North Sea. So might the Secretary of State take this opportunity he has to apologise and clarify those remarks, because thousands of workers in the energy industry supply chain in Aberdeen and across the UK are very worried that their department has such scant regard for them, their work and this world-leading industry.
Well, first of all, let me congratulate him on his promotion, Mr Speaker, to Shadow Secretary of State. On the specific issue that he raises, we will take no lectures from them. 70,000 jobs were lost in the North Sea on their watch. And here is the difference. We are building the future. The Acorn project, talked about for year after year by that side, nothing done. This government is delivering.
Minister Bowie.
Mr Speaker, he won't apologise. That's absolutely fine. The industry already know that this is a government that wants nothing to do with it, takes every opportunity to talk it down and in every effort to shut it down. But in that same session last week, the Minister, sitting to the Secretary of State's left, also claimed, and I quote, that much of the gas that's extracted from the North Sea is exported. Mr Speaker, this is simply not true. 100% of all the gas that's extracted from the North Sea is used in Britain. The Secretary of State knows this, so why is he so determined to talk down this industry, spout falsehoods and myths, drive investment out of the UK, rely more on imports and, crucially, cost people's jobs and drive the skills that we need out of this country? Because that's exactly what he and his colleagues are doing.
Here is the difference between them and us, Mr Speaker, which is they would keep us hooked on fossil fuels for time immemorial. They've learnt not a single lesson from the disaster they inflicted on this country. Family finances ruined, business finances ruined, public finances ruined. A year on, not a word of apology.
Right, Emma Foodie.
Question 3, please, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, with your permission, I'll answer questions 3, 4, 9 and 10 together. Since coming to office, this government has shown how clean power can create jobs across our country. Thousands of jobs in nuclear through our investments in Sizewell C and SMRs, in carbon capture and storage, in offshore wind, in home heating through our Warm Homes plan. That's what it means to deliver reindustrialisation through our clean energy sprint.
Emma Foodie.
I thank the Secretary of State for that answer. The North East is uniquely placed to be the home of the green energy revolution, including the expansion of the Energy Academy in North Tyneside, providing a skills pipeline. How will the Clean Energy Industries Plan help to provide the long-term certainty for investment and to deliver good quality jobs for communities across my Cromlinton and Killingworth constituency and the North East?
Well, Mr Speaker, I see the North East as an absolute powerhouse for the clean energy jobs we want to create. And so early on in this government, we did something which, again, had been talked about for years by the party opposite and actually delivered the East Coast CCUS cluster, projected to create thousands of jobs, including benefits for her constituency. And it's not just the direct jobs, it's the jobs in the supply chain. And we have an absolute opportunity, and the North East will be at the heart of this, to lead in the clean energy jobs of the future.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I declare an interest as the Chair of the APPG for Critical Minerals. And given that building local supply chains in Cornwall is one of the primary means by which, if we're to dig nearly £1 billion worth of stuff out of the ground every year, or pump 95 gigawatts of offshore wind onshore, that local people get the benefit. So what steps is he taking to ensure that supply chain businesses, particularly those of the size that we have in Cornwall, and their workforces get the support they need so that workers and local communities may share in the spoils of that investment?
Let me first say how much I love Cornwall, Mr Speaker. And I love Cornwall for many reasons, but one of the reasons I love it is because of the opportunity it offers to drive the jobs of the future. And you know, I know from my visit, whether it is critical minerals or geothermal or offshore wind, there's just huge opportunities in Cornwall. And that's what the industrial strategy is designed to superpower. That's what the huge investments that my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, made in the spending review will provide. And as part of our clean energy workforce strategy later on this year, Cornwall will be at the heart of it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the Secretary of State loves Harlow as well. Does the Secretary of State agree that the historic investment in the clean energy secured at the spending review will mean thousands of job opportunities for young people, including in Harlow, in renewable energies, in nuclear, in energy efficiency, and so much more?
Mr. Speaker, I love Harlow, and I love Harlow College. And you know, the visits I've had to Harlow College have been incredibly inspiring. And I've seen with my own eyes those young people who are so enthusiastic. I remember talking to them about the green skills, about the jobs of the future. And you know, when I think about what this government is intending to deliver, it's absolutely about his constituents in Harlow.
Trina Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Secretary of State join me in congratulating TK Murray Limited, no relation honest, an energy-saving contractor based in Kilsyth, on having already cross-trained more than half of their installers. They have the workforce to become fully-fledged installers of air source heat pump technology from gas boilers. This has been facilitated by Warmworks, who have developed a supply chain of more than 30 small and medium enterprises to make more than 750 green jobs a reality.
I love Cumbernauld, Mr. Speaker. And look, let me say, I think my honourable friend raises such an important issue, which is the opportunity there is in relation to heat pump technology. And as we see this growth in heat pumps, this isn't just about a better deal for consumers, it's also about the manufacturing that we can see, and she's given us a great example.
Mark Plitchard.
If Secretary of State loves Shropshire, and I'm sure he does, I hope he's not going to bulldoze over all of our green belt, but that's another story for another day. When he talks about green jobs, I'm sure he doesn't want to see our fire service deployed more and more. And does she share my concern that when we have solar energy feeding into battery storage areas, there's a real concern with the Shropshire Fire Service and across this country of fires, out of control fires, very difficult to control by our fire services. And does he agree with me that they should be a statutory consultee on future planning applications for battery storage?
This is an important issue we need to take seriously, and at the moment it is under the health and safety regime, but we are consulting about what the best arrangements can be to make sure that we have the highest standards of safety. There are high standards of safety in place, but as we see the growth of batteries, we want to endeavour, and we will endeavour, to make sure they are maintained.
Alison Bennett.
Mr. Speaker, it goes without saying that I love Burgess Hill. And one brilliant business in Burgess Hill is Steve Willis Training, who this week are celebrating their 25 years of being in business, training the region's future engineers for electricity, plumbing and heating. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that it's vital that these businesses are there delivering the skills of the future? And would you like to join me in congratulating Steve Willis Training on being a brilliant family business providing vital skills to the South East?
I warmly congratulate Steve Willis Training on their 25 years in operation, and indeed the work that they are doing. And I think the Honourable Lady makes such an important point, which is we can help create the jobs with the private sector, but then the question is, are people going to have the skills to fill them? And it sounds like organisations, companies like Steve Willis Training are absolutely fundamental to that. And sometimes it requires lots of training, sometimes it requires short amounts of training to retrain people into the new technologies like heat pumps, but it's vital that it happens.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. People across Basel and Billericay, and indeed across the country, want to see more jobs in energy production, to see cheaper energy. But what they don't understand is why the government is backing some energy, but not all energy. Why is the government insisting on ensuring that jobs in oil and gas are being shipped abroad rather than kept here, while not investing in green energy at exactly the same time?
The answer is we're not, Mr. Mr. Speaker. And look, the reality is, which he knows, is that the North Sea has been a basin in decline. 70,000 jobs have been lost, were lost under the last government. And the question is, do we create the jobs of the future, as well as maintaining existing fields for their lifetime, as this government is committed to do? And you know, if he wants to see those jobs, he should support our plans.
Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tempted as I am to wax lyrical about the beauties of Aberdeenshire, let me give the Secretary a very simple, easy question. By this time next year, how many jobs will GB Energy have created in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire?
GB Energy is going to create thousands of jobs across the country and in Aberdeen. And look, here is the thing why GB Energy really matters. We have chosen to put its headquarters in Aberdeen, recognising that Aberdeen is the clean energy capital of our country, but not just for oil and gas, and that is important, but also for the future. And frankly, they're chuntering from the front bench. They never did anything to create that future for people in Aberdeen.
Colin Miller.
Question number 5, please.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are working together with Ofgem and the National Energy System Operator to accelerate network infrastructure through reforms to planning, supply chains and other areas, delivering the capacity needed to achieve clean power by 2030 and deliver economic growth.
Colin Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency of Bicester and Woodstock, the local plan anticipates significant new employment sites to create jobs and growth. Tritax Big Box tell me that they want to put solar panels on 100% of the usable roof area of the buildings they intend to create. Local planning policies would support this. Yet I was shocked to learn that Tritax only expect to install 25% solar panels on the usable roof space. They cannot get a permit to generate electricity nor consent to export to the grid. So will the Minister or his officials meet with me to discuss how we can turn this into a win-win opportunity for rooftop green solar?
Well, it sounds like a fantastic opportunity, and of course we've set out our ambition is that we'd like to see solar on as many rooftops across the country as possible. It's a win-win, as the honourable gentleman rightly puts it. He and I have spoken about a number of these issues before. I'm very happy to discuss it with them, and if he could write to me with the specifics, we'll certainly look at it. But we are looking at reforming all of those processes to make sure we can get as much power as possible.
Show the Select Committee list.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The challenges in increasing electricity grid capacity include both the ability to get planning consent and to achieve grid connections, as the Minister knows. Now, in the report that the Select Committee published last week, we made reference to the problem of inconsistency in some of the guidance and some of the energy plans between what comes first, the grid connection or the planning consent. Can the Minister please address this and ensure that the government clears up this inconsistency so we can move forward with increasing the electricity generating and grid capacity?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question and for the work that he and the whole committee have been doing on this work. His report has been my bedtime reading every night this week, and it's an important piece of work. He's right about two things. First of all, where processes are not as well aligned as they should be, we absolutely need to look at what we can do to make sure they work much more coherently. But the second point I think his report made, which we're also looking at, is how do we bring together things like the Strategic Spatial Energy Plan, the Holistic Network Design and the Land Use Framework to make sure that we have really coherent plans for across the country so we can plan properly our energy system.
Sean Davis.
Number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we know that the cost of energy is a huge challenge to businesses across the country. This is why our mission to deliver clean power by 2030 is so important, because this is how we get bills down for good. But whilst we get there, we are taking action to support businesses, including through the new British Industrial Competitive Scheme, which will reduce electricity costs by around 20 to 25% for over 7,000 businesses.
When the government helps businesses reduce costs of energy, including aiding their transition, those businesses then can protect and create jobs and pass on savings to customers, from pubs and cafes in Dorley, Maidie and Oaken Gates in my constituency, and manufacturers on Stafford Park and Halesfield in my constituency. Will the government back these businesses and ask the energy giants who continue to make tens of billions of pounds of profit to pay for it?
Look, my honourable friend is completely right to stress the challenges faced by business, and the government is committed to backing businesses. We are working with the regulator to make sure that the system is fair for everyone, and as set out in our industrial strategy from 2027, the new British Industrial Competitive Scheme will reduce electricity costs by up to £40 per megawatt hour, which will benefit thousands of electricity-intensive industries, including the ones in my friend's constituencies. We are very clear we're backing businesses, and we will do everything we can to support them drive down bills.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Energy costs are one of the issues that over the years Prax Oil Refinery have brought to my attention as being one of the problems that they have been facing. I appreciate the calls I've had with her colleague, the Energy Minister. I was able to visit the plant on Friday. Clearly, there is growing concern with hundreds of jobs at risk. What assurance can the Minister offer to those of my constituents?
The honourable member is right to raise this situation. We know it's a very difficult situation. We've been engaging with this. We know that there have been long-standing issues with how the plant is running. But look, what we are trying to do across the piece is support businesses to make the transition and in the transition so that we can protect jobs across the country.
Nick Timothy, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the price cap fell last month, the Labour Party boasted £129 off your bills delivered by Labour. The Minister knows energy bills fell as wholesale gas prices fell, and she knows her policy is to take the country off gas and to keep increasing policy costs on bills. That's why she refuses to repeat the claim. So will she take this opportunity to apologise for her party saying something she knows is untrue?
Every time the honourable member stands up, I hold my head in absolute frustration. He is gambling with fossil fuels, and quite frankly, the party opposite should hang their heads in shame, because energy bills rocketed under their watch. They did nothing about it. They were happy with that. That is not a legacy that we are willing to contend with, which is why we are taking action to drive down bills through our sprint for clean power, and we're taking action in the short term. Their legacy is one they should be ashamed of, rather than lecturing us.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 7.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'll answer questions 7 and 24 together. The Clean Power 2030 Action Plan makes clear that nuclear will play an important role in our future energy system, providing low-carbon baseload power to the grid. We're delivering the biggest new nuclear building programme in a generation, having committed almost £17 billion at the recent spending review.
David Taylor.
Mr. Speaker, I was grateful to the Secretary of State for showing his love for Hemel Hempstead when he came to launch a new scheme on solar panels the other month. But on the question of new nuclear and clean jobs in general, could the Minister outline how communities like mine in Hemel Hempstead will benefit from these new jobs?
Well, my right honourable friend says we love Hemel Hempstead, and I think we agree on that. So, in answer to my honourable friend's question, the nuclear sector, of course, it's poised for significant growth, which will help deliver on our energy needs in the future, but it is also how we'll deliver thousands of skilled jobs across the country. And the Nuclear Skills Plan is a collaborative effort between government, industry and academia, setting out the targeted work that we need to address that skills gap and to bring forward the thousands of apprentices that we'll need to deliver this work in the future. And the regional skills hubs that we have established will help deliver that training support locally to ensure that every community in the country benefits.
Adam Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rolls-Royce in Derby has recently been announced as the preferred bidder for the delivery of small modular reactors, which means many of my Erewash constituents will become the beating heart of the workforce who deliver those reactors. Can the Minister explain how Derbyshire's finest SMRs will help end our reliance on foreign oil and gas?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. The government is committed to delivering a new golden age of nuclear, securing an abundance of clean power after 14 years of dither and delay from the party opposite. And with that, of course, will come investment across the country. And on the 10th of June, following a robust 2-year process, Great British Energy Nuclear selected Rolls-Royce SMR as its preferred bidder, which will deliver the UK's first small modular reactors subject to final government approvals and contract signature. And the government is making available £2.5 billion across the spending review to enable this to be one of Europe's first SMR programmes.
James Shannon.
very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his answers? Minister, I've always been a supporter of nuclear power. Unfortunately, we don't have the access to nuclear power in Northern Ireland, but I know in discussions with the Minister in the past, he's very keen to ensure that the nuclear modular power or opportunities are available in Northern Ireland. The Northern Ireland Assembly and businesses that I talk to also want access to that. I know the Minister is always committed positively to trying to make things better. So, in relation to that, has the Minister had an opportunity to talk with the relevant Minister at the Northern Ireland Assembly to ensure that access for modular and nuclear power is available for us in Northern Ireland? Thanks so much.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I regularly engage with the ministers in the Northern Irish Executive, including the Department for the Economy, which of course has responsibility for energy policy in Northern Ireland, and we discuss a range of issues. We're very happy to support the Northern Irish Executive in any way we can with either the technology or rolling out any of the regulatory framework that we've got at the moment. And of course on SMRs, we're really excited about what the opportunity for that poses and happy to discuss that in Northern Ireland as well.
Wendy Bolton.
Number 8, please.
Minister.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer question 8 and 25 together. We understand that the high energy bills are a challenge for businesses, particularly energy-intensive companies. We are very clear that in the long term, our mission to deliver clean power is the only way that we can bear down on this cost. But whilst we get there, we're providing support needed through the British Industrial Competitive Scheme and the Supercharger Scheme, protecting over 7,000 businesses.
Speaker, the UK's industrial electricity prices are amongst the highest in Europe, and it's quite clear that the government's current policies are failing manufacturing businesses in constituencies such as mine. So I'd like to ask the Minister today if she will commit to introducing support that genuinely reduces electricity costs for manufacturers, including tackling high wholesale energy prices rather than prolonging the uncertainty, which sadly puts local jobs at risk.
Mr. Speaker, I will gently remind the honourable member that industrial energy prices rocketed on their watch, with gas prices for non-domestic companies going up by 170%. Absolutely catastrophic for UK PLC. We are taking the action to support businesses by our sprint to clean power and critically by the measures that we're providing through the British Industrial Competitive Scheme, measures that have been supported by Make UK, the British Chambers of Commerce, the UK Steel, the Chemical Industries Association. They dithered, delayed and did nothing to support businesses. We are cracking on and getting on with the job.
John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Friday, I visited C&M Precision Limited, which is a small manufacturing company in my constituency for whom electricity represents easily the biggest cost. Can she say what she is doing to listen to small businesses, SMEs like C&M, who feel that their voice is simply not being heard?
Mr. Speaker, we are listening to businesses, particularly small and medium-sized businesses. We have heard companies complain, for example, about being locked into expensive fixed-term contracts. This is why Ofgem is working to deliver blend and extend contracts so businesses can benefit from lower prices. We have heard their frustration at the lack of a redress system, which is why last December we expanded the Ombudsman service to 99% of businesses so that they can get redress and financial awards of up to $20,000. And we have heard their frustration around energy brokers, which is why we have consulted on introducing regulation of third-party intermediaries and will be responding in due course.
Reader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Energy Security and Net Zero Select Committee heard from Make UK and from representatives from the chemical, petrochemical, steel, ceramics industry that closer alignment and collaboration with the EU on energy pricing is absolutely critical to reducing bills. It's also recognised in the government's own industrial strategy. So what more is the department doing to bring this forward quickly?
My honourable friend makes a very good point. Look, industry voices have been calling for that closer alignment. They have particularly been calling for closer alignment on the ETS. This is something we've heard from UK Steel, from the CBI, from Make UK, energy intensive users groups. And we believe that those stronger linkages are the right thing to do to cut red tape at the border, to protect consumers from higher costs and critically to boost trade and growth, which this government is absolutely committed to doing.
Strather.
Mr. Speaker, one way to drive down energy costs, including for energy-intensive industries, could be to help cut curtailment costs by encouraging co-location of new energy-intensive industry sectors with some of those renewable sectors we're currently having to pay to switch off. What conversations have the ministers been having about, as we start to roll out more data centres across the country, how these could be optimally located to help reduce our energy bills at the same time?
My honourable friend makes a very good point, as always. We are working across government, so we are working as part of the AI Council. Our colleagues in DBT, as well as our colleagues here in the Business Department, are working to make sure we have that coordination, that collaboration to support businesses on the ground.
Martin Coder.
11, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We will continue to support new renewables through the Contracts for Difference scheme in conjunction with initiatives such as the Warm Homes Plan, Future Home Standard and the Boiler Upgrade Scheme. Great British Energy and Great British Energy Nuclear will together invest more than £8.3 billion over this Parliament in homegrown clean power.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the government's mission to achieve clean power by 2030, and I know that the Minister will agree with me that it's vital that we make that transition to net zero as quickly as possible to fight climate change but also lower energy bills. But does he agree with me that where previous governments have failed to deliver for the British people, our plans are the single best way to bring down energy bills for families, including in my Battersea constituency, and provide them with the much needed energy security?
Well, I completely agree with my honourable friend, and she makes the point that this isn't just about action on the climate, as important as that is. It's not just about creating thousands of new jobs. It's about bringing down bills, but also, crucially, delivering on that energy security point. And the truth of this is that while our clean power mission is all about doing all three of those things at the same time, the party opposite opposes all of that action. They would leave us much more vulnerable to the volatility of the fossil fuel markets, but they would also turn their face against the economic opportunity of the 21st century.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister will recognise that one way to increase the supply of clean energy is to enable community energy projects to supply local energy markets. When ministers are asked about this, as they have been, as he knows, many times, they generally say there is no technical obstacle to that happening. But will he recognise there is a world of difference between something being technically possible and, on the other hand, being facilitated and encouraged so it really happens? Will he focus on the latter as the government develops their energy market reforms?
Well, I actually completely agree with him. He's absolutely right. There is no technical barriers to us doing it. It doesn't mean that it's a straightforward process. And actually, to be absolutely honest, things that I thought would have been much more straightforward, like how we define community, is actually more difficult to do to make sure we get this right. But we're absolutely determined to do it because he's right. He makes the point that if we can deliver clean power that benefits local communities and that they can buy that power locally and really see the benefit of hosting it, that's exactly what we're determined to do, and we will continue to work to make that happen.
Okay, Kirsty.
Number 12, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we know that households are under huge pressure with the cost of living, and energy costs are a big part of that. The expansion of the Warm Homes Discount Scheme will mean nearly 3 million more families will receive vital support with their energy bills this winter. This will provide much needed help at a time that we know that people desperately need it.
Okay, Kirsty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister confirm how many residents in my North Durham constituency will benefit from the extension of the Warm Homes discount to all households in receipt of means-tested benefits?
Thank you to my honourable friend. Now, sadly, we don't have data at constituency level, sadly, but what I can tell my honourable friend, who was a brilliant champion for his constituency, is that around 100,000 extra households in the North East will benefit from this expansion, an increase of around 50%.
Campbell.
Speaker, the Minister will be aware that there are many homes, particularly in rural areas, where there are older properties that are difficult to insulate. Will she concentrate and agree with me that we need, all of us, to concentrate on those older type of homes, many of which are used as homes for elderly people who cannot afford expensive energy? We need to concentrate on ensuring that they are properly insulated, and the Warm Homes scheme is extended to homes like that.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member makes a really important point. We are very clear that we need to make sure that we have solutions and the right solutions for every household, including households in rural communities. I have met with representatives from rural communities, with councils, with members, as well as with some of the companies that are trying to do work in rural communities. We're absolutely committed to getting this right as part of the Warm Homes Plan.
Just Brentford.
Question 13, Mr. Speaker.
So stay.
Mr. Speaker, since the election last year, we've secured over £50 billion investment into the UK's clean energy industries. Last year's renewables auction round 6 was the most successful in our history, and we'll be shortly opening the AR7 auction. This is the way to deliver energy security, lower bills and good jobs for our communities.
Just Brentford.
I thank the Secretary of State for his answer. Private sector investment via community energy schemes is a popular way of engaging people to get behind renewable energy projects in their area. A great example of this is Meadow Blue Community Energy in my constituency of Chichester that puts money back into the community with a grant scheme and is now funding solar panels on local school roofs. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that these community energy projects would attract more private sector investment if grid access costs were reduced and local supply was actually made easier to deliver?
I think the Honourable Lady raises a very, very important issue, which was also raised by the Right Honourable gentleman. She's right about the virtues of community energy. That's why Great British Energy is going to partner with local communities to deliver community energy up and down the country, because sometimes public capital, it could be loans, could be grants, can help lever in the private capital we need. But she's also right, as my Honourable friend the Energy Minister said, about some of the barriers, and I want to sort of assure her that we are going through in granular nerdy detail the different barriers and how we break them down.
Mr. Speaker, I must declare an interest as a crofting tenant of Knockensordle Common Grazing, a good a definition of a community as you can ever get. But Knockensordle, along with several other community power schemes in my constituency, cannot get grid connections except through active network management connections, which basically means the communities can supply power to the grid when the big boys, the commercial companies, are not. These connection offers are next to useless, and NISO, Ofgem and the transmission companies have to be told from this dispatch box that they cannot be agnostic about what kind of grid connection they offer and to whom. They must put communities first if communities are going to support this transition.
Well, look, my honourable friend, who I've talked to on a number of occasions about these wider issues, raises a really important point. Let me take away, I was talking to the Energy Minister about it, let me take away the point he raises about this access question, because we are committed to driving forward community energy, and we will talk to NISO and Ofgem to get it right and make sure it happens.
Question 14, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Yesterday, the Secretary of State gave an incredibly important statement to this House outlining the crises we face when it comes to climate change and the decline of nature. Tackling this starts with being honest about the science and what the experts are telling us. We know that we can only have climate security for future generations by acting at scale today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her answer. Energy security isn't just important for its work that will help to bring bills down now, but does she agree with me that it's also vital for the future and protecting future generations, including in my constituency of eminently lovable Watford, because those young people are the people who will face the climate change consequences in years to come? Thank you.
As someone who grew up in Luton, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say I love Watford. There's an age-old rivalry there. But yes, we know that acting now with our clean energy superpower mission, scaling up renewables, reinforcing the grid and reducing our reliance on volatile fossil fuel markets will mean a cleaner, more secure future for future generations. That is why, unlike the party opposite, we are following the science and we are showing the leadership that's needed at home and abroad.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Around Beverley, there are proposals for 5 solar farms coming altogether to 465 megawatts. Can the Minister assure my constituents that the scientific evidence that will be used to assess this will include the cumulative impact of these projects on the area around Beverley?
Yes, of course, we look at the cumulative impact of these developments. Having been in the department, he will know that we have an excellent team of scientists led by Professor Paul Monks. I do want to pay tribute to him because he is standing down later this year, and I'm sure the honourable member will want to do so too.
Secretary of State, Claire Coutinho, and congratulations on your marriage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Secretary of State tried to argue yesterday that he's a climate change believer and everybody else who disagrees with him is a denier because he doesn't want to engage with any legitimate criticism of his policies. He is offshoring British industries, in other words, replacing British goods with dirtier imports with higher emissions. So can the Honourable Lady confirm where the scientific evidence is that that will help to tackle climate change?
That's the question.
Well, perhaps if the Right Honourable Member had been here yesterday, she'd have been able to engage with the Secretary of State about that then. The science is absolutely clear. Every avoided fraction of a degree of warming makes a difference to the severity of climate impacts. That's why the Prime Minister went to the Global Leaders Summit at COP29 last year to announce a new 1.5 degrees aligned NDC. That's why we'll continue to show international leadership.
Christine Jacques.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Question number 15.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the government has stepped in to ensure a more controlled and carefully managed phase-out of the radio teleswitch service. I have been engaging directly on this and meeting with both Energy UK and Ofgem fortnightly to discuss progress and suppliers' phase-out plan. And my focus and priority is absolutely clear to ensure that there is no impact on consumers and that we minimise any consumer detriment.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the government's change in course because the previous hard deadline would have left many people in my constituency of Edinburgh West vulnerable, indeed unaware that there was any need to change the meter. But there's still a big problem in Scotland. There's 100,000 people who still are waiting on meters or may be unaware. So while she's engaging with the community, could the Minister tell us, please, what she's doing in Scotland to ensure that those rural communities specifically are approached and that vulnerable people get protection?
Mr. Speaker, we've been working really closely with the Scottish Government. We've been engaging with Scottish MPs. We know that there is about 97,000 metres that we need to replace in Scotland. All of those households have been contacted multiple times. In addition to that, because we know there are particular challenges in some of our rural communities, we have done a sprint where suppliers are working together in collaboration with the local authority in order to get those replacement rate down. What I can reassure her is that no area will be switched off without us contacting consumers to inform them and allowing them to book in emergency appointments, and critically without informing MPs as well as local authorities so that we can do this in the best possible way.
Good swallow.
Number 16, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
The Committee on Climate Change report made clear the progress we have made in the past 12 months, overturning the terrible legacy of the party opposite who turned their back on climate action. We know clean power is the route to energy security, lower bills and good jobs. It's a shame the Tories and reform are still stuck in the past.
Mr. Speaker, the Climate Committee report says the UK should be proud of its approach to consistent and sustained decarbonisation, but we know there's much more to do. This week, Bracknell Forest Community Climate Action are hosting a summit to discuss what can be done locally to address climate change and support nature. Does the Minister agree that local initiatives like this demonstrate the strong public support for action on climate change?
Yes, we know that there is strong public support and we're keen to engage more at a local level with groups like Bracknell Forest Community Climate Action. That's why we've set up the local Net Zero Delivery Group to work with councils and mayors, and that's why we'll be producing a public participation strategy later this year. I very much hope that the honourable members' constituents will get involved with that.
Dr. Dunn-Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the Minister join me in congratulating the fantastic Lib Dem run Winchester City Council for being rated the greenest council in the UK by Climate Action UK. That's a lot of work from politicians, and it does show what politicians who believe in this issue dearly can achieve if they crack on and deal with it, rather than weaponising it as some kind of culture war.
Yeah, I'm happy to join him in congratulating his local council. And I was at the LGA week before last, I think, with the local Net Zero Delivery Group, which is where we've got representation from all areas of local government, really keen to see how we can learn from the best and translate that into action for others that need a bit more encouragement.
Helen Maguire.
Question 17, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our Clean Power 2030 action plan sets out our pathway for delivering clean power. To support this, we recently launched the Solar Roadmap, which confirms plans to increase domestic solar installations through the Future Home Standard and Warms Home Plan.
Wow.
Mr. Speaker. Over 50% of our food and 2.7 billion in life-saving medicines depend on the cold chain, but operators face soaring energy costs and growing grid instability. In Epsom and Ewell, SunSwap is pioneering battery and solar-powered refrigeration, cutting emissions while protecting vital supply chains. Will the Minister commit to targeted support for renewable energy innovators like SunSwap, whose technology can strengthen both sustainability and national resilience?
Well, the Honourable Lady is right that we've got an enormous amount of innovation in this space and real potential to meet our future needs, not just from the pathway that we've outlined, but through innovative solutions like the one she mentions that provide that specific support to targeted industries. I'm very happy to look more into the proposals that she makes and to look at the funding that is available for innovation. And if she wants to write to me with any details, I'll happily follow up.
Ed Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Business in the village of Fradley in my constituency has a plan where they want to put millions of watts of solar on their roofs of their businesses. Unfortunately, they can't proceed with that application because there isn't sufficient export capacity on site. They will never export a watt of that electricity. It doesn't even meet it meets a fraction of their energy needs. Will the Minister meet with me so we can discuss how we can make some regulatory changes to support projects like this?
Well, my honourable friend makes a point that I think has been raised by others in this debate, and it's why we're looking so closely at the granular levels of detail and how the system works to make sure that the regulatory landscape does deliver on opportunities like that. I'm very happy to meet with them to discuss it further, and we're taking that really detailed look at every single aspect so that communities, businesses and others can benefit from being able to export much of this power into the grid, which helps, of course, the country with its energy needs, but also helps deliver a benefit for those local communities.
Alex Brough.
Question 18, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'm responding to questions 18, 22 and 23 together. Look, we believe that the best way to protect households permanently is through our mission to deliver clean power by 2030. This, combined with our Warm Homes plan to upgrade millions of homes across the country to make them warmer and cheaper to run, will drive down energy bills and make cold homes a thing of the past. But whilst we make that transition, we know that we need to support people, which is why we're extending the Warm Homes discount.
Thank the Minister for her response. Almost 10% of people in my constituency of North East Hampshire are living in fuel poverty, and I agree with the Minister that investing in renewable energy would help to tackle this. So how is the Minister working with MHCLG to empower local authorities to develop their renewable energy generation locally, for example by following Europe's lead in putting solar panels over car parks to make energy more sustainable and cheaper?
The Honourable Member is completely right. There is a big push to work with local authorities, to work with regional authorities to make sure that we are not only generating renewables that can impact on bills, but also that we're doing the job of upgrading homes. Through local energy action plans, we, for the first time, have local authorities working with NESO and other system operators to drive this. But critically, we believe that local authorities, regional authorities have a crucial role to play in upgrading millions of homes across the country.
Bundle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Harewood and Middleton North live in a state of profound uncertainty when it comes to the unpredictability of global energy markets and how this will affect their families. Does the Minister agree with me that if we want to protect those families from volatility, we must end our reliance on global fossil fuel markets and introduce targeted interventions to bring bills down, particularly for those on the lowest incomes that need them the most?
My honourable friend, Mr. Speaker, is completely right, which is why it beggars belief that the party opposite are so stuck in their ideological opposition to removing from clean power. We are very clear that we've got to break this dependence on global fossil fuel markets. That's the thing that led to record energy bills in the energy crisis, and we are doing the job of making that sprint. But critically, whilst we transition, we know we need to support the most vulnerable households, which is why I'm so proud that it is this government that has extended the Warm Homes discount so that an extra 2.7 million households will benefit this winter, 1 in 5 households.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate ministers again on embracing the principles of the Sunshine Bill campaign run by me and many others to ensure that solar panels are going to be included on the roofs of all new houses. People in my constituency have been sweltering in the heat in recent weeks in beautiful old Regency buildings, which pose a particular challenge in this area. Do ministers agree with me that lining up heat pump technology and solar panels can both lower our energy bills and keep us cool at the same time?
The honourable member is completely right. So we believe in a solar panel revolution. This is one of the key jobs that the GB Energy will be doing across the country. But there is a critical job in making sure that as we are upgrading homes, we're also making them fit for purpose for overheating in the context of climate change. So you will, for example, see, Mr. Speaker, that we are including air-to-air heat pumps within the boiler upgrade schemes, and we'll be looking at other measures to make sure we keep homes cool.
Speaker, the government has made long overdue steps to secure rooftop solar on new builds. There is an even greater untapped potential on existing commercial and domestic rooftops. Will ministers consider introducing a scheme similar to that seen in other countries, offering free installation of rooftop solar to businesses and residents, paid back through a long-term power purchasing agreement, simultaneously increasing the supply of clean energy and cutting bills?
My honourable friend is completely right to talk about the potential of solar on our commercial buildings. We know that solar, for example, can reduce energy bills by about £600. We are looking at all the options because we are absolutely serious about a solar revolution, a solar rooftop revolution, whether that is in our homes or our commercial buildings.
Pippa Hailing, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We welcomed the joint agreement signed in May between the UK and the EU, where there were small steps taken to address the impacts of the Conservatives' botched Brexit deal on energy costs and bills. So I'd like to ask the Secretary of State what further steps he will be taking to forge energy cooperation through a recoupling of the UK and EU electricity markets and the UK's participation in the EU's internal electricity market to boost trade, bring down renewable energy costs and reduce energy bills.
Mr. Speaker, we've been listening to industry voices and they are very clear about the opportunities for stronger alignment. We will continue to engage with them. We'll continue to engage with our partners in the EU to think about the opportunities as we make the sprint to clean power.
Go to Toplands, Graham Stewart.
Question 1, sir.
Mr. Speaker, since the last oral questions, the spending review announced the largest investment in clean energy in our country's history, investment in new nuclear, in carbon capture and storage, in hydrogen transport and storage, and investing £8.3 billion through Great British Energy and £13.2 billion in our Warm Homes plan for energy security, lower bills and good jobs.
Evidence from National Grid, Ofgem and Imperial College show that locational or zonal pricing would save billions of pounds a year, lower bills and reduce the need for expensive and often unpopular grid infrastructure. Why has he ruled it out?
Well, I made a comprehensive statement to the House on this last Thursday, Mr. Speaker, and the grounds are these, which is, one, the question of fairness, two, the question of the costs of the transition and what would happen in the meantime. We need investment in our clean energy infrastructure, we need investment in growth, and I believe that our way of reform national pricing is the right way forward.
Ben Goldsborough.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the fight for energy security, every area of our country must play its part, but that means energy infrastructure projects should be distributed evenly. So can I ask the Minister, what is his department doing to ensure that no community will be asked to do more than their fair share?
Well, I think he makes an important point, and that's why the Strategic Spatial Energy Plan will set out where we need our energy infrastructure so that we can see and we can have a planned system which matches power needs, infrastructure at least cost to bill payers and taxpayers.
So, Secretary of State Claire Kitty.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And I will just briefly say that yesterday the Secretary of State said I was hiding when I was, in fact, with my 6-month-old baby, who I know he's aware of. So on behalf of all young mums who face these kinds of comments in their first few weeks back to work, can I gently suggest he reflects on those remarks? Now, can I ask the Secretary of State a very simple question? Is £82 higher or lower than £72?
First point, I completely respect her decision to be with her young baby, and there was no offence intended. I think it's very, very important that we understand the needs of new parents and indeed parents across the country. On the question she asked, I don't know what she's getting at, frankly.
So he doesn't know.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know if he doesn't know or he doesn't want to say, but £72 a megawatt hour, that's what electricity cost last year. £82, that's the price he's paid for offshore wind, and he's set to do the same this year. And that's before the extra costs for grid for wasted wind and backup, which are going through the roof thanks to his policies. Yesterday, he committed to radical honesty. In that spirit, will he either admit that he can't add up or that his policies can't bring down bills?
I'm going to be radically honest and tell her the truth, Mr. Speaker, which is this. She is gambling on fossil fuels, the same thing she did which led us to the worst cost of living crisis in our country's history. Family finance is wrecked, businesses' finance is wrecked, and public finances wrecked. And the only way to bring down bills for good is cheap, homegrown power that we control. We have an energy security plan, they have an energy surrender plan.
And Lisa Midgley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister say what ambitions they hold for sectors and technologies GB Energy will prioritise, since the CEO has said he wants to evolve it into a major energy company, and what it might mean for job creation, including in constituencies like mine?
I think there's a whole range of projects that GB Energy will prioritise, and in a sense it is a matter for them as a publicly owned energy company, but at arm's length from government. But whether you look at floating wind or tidal or hydrogen or indeed offshore wind and supply chains, there's huge opportunities right across our country. GB Energy, owned by the public, benefiting people right across Britain.
Pepper Hailing, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Across Europe, we've already seen 2,300 heatwave-related deaths, avoidable deaths, Mr. Speaker, and the Met Office report says that's just going to get worse. I and the Lib Dems have a really cool idea. So will the Secretary of State work with local authorities to open up public spaces with air conditioning, like leisure centres and libraries, to provide relief for the elderly and vulnerable from extreme heat? Thank you.
Well, look, I think there's no monopoly on good ideas, Mr. Speaker, and I think the Honourable Lady raises a really important issue, which is how we adapt as a country to the climate crisis. And we know we have a lot more to do, and so we'll listen to all good ideas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency of Stourbridge, I'm proud that we have the first example in the country of a high energy use craft which has transitioned fully to renewables, and work with a UK manufacturer to create a super efficient electric furnace, and that is Alistair Malcolm Glass at the Stourbridge Glass Museum. Will the Minister come to Stourbridge and visit Stourbridge Glass Museum with me to highlight it as an example for others to follow and protect high energy use heritage crafts across the country?
Well, look, I think it's actually a great example that she's raised, and I'm going to take a risk and say, yes, I will come to Stourbridge. I love Stourbridge, and I look forward to seeing this project.
Hello, Daniel.
Mr. Speaker, the Government's new Scope 3 guidance for offshore projects is hugely welcome. We are already battling deadly heat waves and overshooting climate limits, so it's critical that we stop extracting new oil and gas. Given that there is no scenario in which Rosebank or indeed any new oil and gas wells are compatible with limiting global temperature increases to 1.5 degrees, why is this government trying to delay recognition of that climate reality by saying that applications will be considered on a case-by-case basis? And will he please just give us a conclusive science-backed answer now and confirm that Rosebank won't be going ahead?
Firstly, I would just say that, of course, the government follows the regulations that we've put in place quickly, and applications must be considered on a case-by-case basis. That's the way anyone would expect them to be dealt with. I'm not going to say on the floor of the House any more about those particular applications. There are live decisions that will be made in due course by the Department.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What reassurance can the Minister offer the nearly 1,000 workers at Prax that the government is 100% focused on finding a new owner for the Lindsay Oil Refinery?
Well, firstly, Mr. Speaker, I'd repeat what I've said before, that we're obviously hugely disappointed by the way that the owners dealt with the company, and I repeat the pledge that I've made, the ask that I've made here a number of times and in writing to the Chief Executive, that he should put his hands in his pockets and do the right thing by the workforce there. We're doing everything we can as part of the insolvency process to safely manage the refinery and, of course, to look at whether there are buyers interested in taking it on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The OBR's latest central estimate puts the cost of achieving net zero by 2050 at £803 billion, with half of this cost attributed to lost fuel duties. Does the Secretary of State accept that the government will need to increase duties elsewhere, including on renewables, which could push bills up further?
I think the most significant thing about the OBR report, Mr. Speaker, is it says there is an 8% threat to our GDP by 2070 in a 3-degree world and a 56% rise in the debt to GDP ratio if we do not act on climate change. That is the most important thing from that report, which I recommend to all honourable members to read over the summer.
Juliette Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have received numerous emails from my constituents in Broxtowe raising concerns about the loss or threat to meadows. Meadows are critical to our environment and have been part of our natural heritage for centuries. Meadows provide a wealth of benefits such as unique wildlife habitat, flood alleviation, and promotes clean energy, clean air. Without better protection, remaining historic meadows and their ecological value risk vanishing beneath our feet. So will the Secretary of State commit to including the protection of meadows to the list of irreplaceable habitats?
Okay. I appreciate the honourable members' concerns. It's a matter for DEFRA, but very happy to talk to them as they bring forward their land use framework. We think nature-based solutions to climate change really important, so we very much engage with our colleagues in DEFRA on these issues.
Maddie.
Cyfarwydd, solar developers are not playing by the rules when it comes to accessing land of people on Ynys Môn. Government guidance say that developers must act reasonably when trying to obtain permission to access the land. My constituents have received threatening emails and even cases of developers trespassing on land. Does the Secretary of State condone this sort of behaviour, and does he believe that the current guidance is strong enough to protect constituents like mine?
Well, I don't know the specifics of the case that she raises. If she wants to send any details to me, I'll certainly look at it. But clearly what we want to see and what we expect in every single case is a partnership here between developers who are delivering projects that we think are important, the planning system that's responsible for putting the processes in place, and obviously communities who should have their local area protected and be able to access it. So if there are specifics she wants to raise with me, I'm happy to follow up.
Steve Bitham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Frynwy-Frankton project, which aims to connect onshore wind to the grid, would cut across my constituency and affect local communities and cherished countryside, posing a threat to businesses and tourism. Can the Minister assure me that the impact of this project and its associated lifetime costs will be minimised by undergrounding the cables along the route, except where geology makes this impossible?
Well, that's not the position of the government, because report after report and evidence points to the fact that undergrounding is significantly more expensive than above-ground cabling. But clearly individual applications will look at the individual circumstances and make a decision on that. What we have said as a government, though, that communities that host network infrastructure should benefit from having that infrastructure through community benefits and direct money off bills, and that's what we'll be delivering.
And the message objective.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my Huntingdon constituency, the surplus MOD land at RF Whitton was recently announced as having been designated as an MOD trailblazer site. The Housing Minister confirmed to me last week that no assessment has yet been made of the energy infrastructure currently in place. The Prime Minister recently confirmed to me here in the Chamber that my proposal to develop a defence technology cluster on the site would be supported, and so to that end, would the Energy Minister be prepared to look into the available energy infrastructure and substation connectivity at the site and write to me with his assessment?
Well, the honourable gentleman is assiduous in raising these sorts of questions with me. Of course, I'm very happy to look at the possibilities. He's right to outline the potential of sites like that, and we'll look at it.
Tracy Gilbert.
Nova Innovation in my Edinburgh North and Leith constituency are pioneering floating solar, which is then generating clean energy. Can my honourable friend outline what steps the government are taking to support the development of floating solar?
Incredibly exciting, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to finding out more.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've been using floating solar technology in this country since 2016. Last month, the French started the largest plant in Europe at 74.3 megawatts, and the Chinese have single plants that produce 350 megawatts. So given the scale of use across the country, the world, bar Britain, why did the Secretary of State refer to floating solar as a nascent technology? What's nascent about it?
It sounds like I'm being educated about floating solar. I'm happy to share his enthusiasm for floating solar, and if he's got proposals about how we take it forward, I'm all ears.
There you go. Remove.
Whereas, Mr. Speaker, in France, Germany, Croatia and elsewhere in mainland Europe, they're taking geothermal energy very seriously. I was disappointed that geothermal energy got little mention in the industrial strategy, particularly as there's estimated to be 30 gigawatts of energy in the Cornish granite batholith. Will the Secretary of State meet with me to discuss how we clear the barriers to unleash the potential of the Cornish granite batholith?
Well, I thank my honourable friend who always raises the huge potential of Cornwall in this House in the energy space. He's right to talk about the potential for geothermal. We're hugely excited about the opportunities that presents. I'm very happy to meet with him and others to discuss further how we can take it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm already being contacted by constituents in North East Fife who are worried about affording energy bills this winter, but don't feel that the service they are getting from the energy companies is properly supporting them. What steps is the government doing to make sure that energy companies do provide the support that they need?
Mr. Speaker, we are very clear that energy companies have strict obligations to follow. We are working with Ofgem to make sure that they do adhere to those obligations, but we're also doing the job of reviewing Ofgem to make sure that it is a proper consumer champion with both the mandate but the powers to work on behalf of consumers and reform this market so it works in the interest of her constituents.
Final question, Brian Lishman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Over 100 INEOS chemical employees are to lose their jobs at Grangemouth because the refinery closed. The £200 million commitment for Project Willow doesn't help them in the here and now, and it's frankly an insult to the workers who are about to lose their livelihoods by talking about training opportunities at Forth Valley College that are not being afforded to them. What has the government actually done and are going to do for those workers that don't have the same redundancy or training package as the refinery workers?
Well, we are looking at, in the round, how we can deliver jobs and opportunities in the Grangemouth site. The National Wealth Fund made the unprecedented commitment for £200 million. I've been meeting with potential companies that are interested in developing projects there to make sure we get them over the line. We've delivered on the training guarantee. We've delivered support above the Falkirk and Grangemouth growth deal. We're doing everything we can to support the workforce there, and we'll continue to do that.
Right, come and let the front benches change over. We now come to the statement. Secretary of State for Defence, John Healey.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I wish to make a statement on a significant data protection breach from February 2022 relating to the Afghan relocations and assistance policy. This led to the High Court granting an unprecedented super injunction and the previous government establishing a secret Afghan resettlement route. Today, I'm announcing to the House a change in government policy. I'm closing this resettlement route, I'm disclosing the data loss, and I'm confirming that the court order was lifted at 12 noon today. Members of this House, including you, Mr. Speaker, and myself, have been subject to this super injunction. It is unprecedented. And to be clear, the Court has always recognised the parliamentary privilege of proceedings in this House, and ministers decided not to tell parliamentarians at an earlier stage about the data incident, as the widespread publicity would increase the risk of the Taliban obtaining the data set. But as parliamentarians and as government ministers, it has been deeply uncomfortable to be constrained from reporting to this House. And I'm grateful today to be able to disclose the details to Parliament. And I trust you, Mr. Speaker, and members will bear with me if I take the time to ensure the House now has the fullest information possible, something I discussed with you, Mr. Speaker, yesterday. Mr. Speaker, the facts are as follows. In February 2022, 10 months after the then Defence Secretary Ben Wallace introduced the Afghan relocations and assistance policy, 6 months after the fall of Kabul, a defence official emailed an Arab caseworking file outside of authorised government systems. Arab, as the House knows, is the resettlement scheme that this country established for Afghan citizens who worked for or with our UK armed forces over the combat years of Afghanistan. And both in opposition and in government, we have backed this scheme. I know ARAP also has had the full support from across this House. Now, this official mistakenly believed that they were sending the names of 150 applicants. However, the spreadsheet in fact contained personal information associated to 18,714 Afghans who had applied either to the ex gratia or the ARAP scheme on or before the 7th of January 2022. It contained names and contact details of applicants and, in some instances, information relating to applicants' family members. And in a small number of cases, Mr. Speaker, the names of members of Parliament, senior military officers and government officials were noted as supporting the application. This was a serious departmental error. It was in clear breach of strict data protection protocols, and it was one of many data losses relating to the ARAP scheme during this period. Now, previous government ministers first became aware of this data loss in mid-August 2023, 18 months after the incident. They became aware of the loss when personal details of 9 individuals from the dataset appeared online. Action was taken to ensure they were swiftly removed, an internal investigation was conducted, and the incident was reported both to the Metropolitan Police and to the Information Commissioner. The Met deemed that no criminal investigation was necessary, and the Information Commissioner has continued to work with the department throughout. However, journalists were almost immediately aware of the breach, and the previous administration applied to the High Court for an injunction to prevent the data loss becoming public. The judge deemed the risk warranted going further, and on the 1st of September 2023 granted a super injunction which prevented the disclosure of the very existence of the injunction. Mr. Speaker, that super injunction has been in place for nearly 2 years, during which time 8 media organisations and their journalists have been served to prohibit any reporting. And no government wishes to withhold information from the British public, from parliamentarians or the press in this manner. In autumn 2023, previous ministers started work on establishing a new settlement scheme, specifically designed for people in this compromised data set who were not eligible for ARAP. Not eligible for ARAP, but nevertheless judged to be at the highest risk of reprisals by the Taliban. It is known as the Afghan Response Route, ARR. It was covered by the super injunction. And the then government initially established the ARR to resettle a target cohort of around 200 principals. But in early 2024, a combination of the Minister's decisions on the scheme's policy design and the court's views had broadened this category to nearly 3,000 principals. I want to provide assurance, Mr. Speaker, both to the House and to the British public, that all individuals relocated under the Afghan Response Route, ARAP, or the Home Office's ACRS scheme undergo strict national security checks before being able to enter our country. And the full number of Afghan arrivals under all schemes have been reported in the regular Home Office statistics, meaning that they are already counted in the existing migration figures. Now, as Shadow Defence Secretary, I was initially briefed on the ARR by James Heappey, the former Armed Forces Minister, on the 12th of December 2023. and issued with the super injunction at the start of that meeting. Other members of the present Cabinet were only informed of the evidence of the data breach, the operation of the ARR, and the existence of the super injunction on taking office after the general election. By this time, the ARR scheme was fully established and in operation. By this time, it was nearly 2.5 years since the data loss. I have felt deeply concerned about the lack of transparency to Parliament and to the public. I felt it only right to assess the decision-making criteria for the ARR. So we began, straight away, to take a hard look at the policy complexities, the costs, the risks, the court hearings, and the range of Afghan relocation schemes that the previous government was running. Cabinet colleagues endorsed the need for new insights into the scheme in autumn last year while the scheme kept running, and in December 2024 I announced the streamlining of the range of government schemes that we inherited into the Afghan resettlement programme to better establish value for money, establish a single set of time-limited entitlements, and support to get the Afghan families resettled. And I would like to thank, on behalf of the House, Mr. Speaker, our colleagues in local government without whom this unified resettlement programme would simply not be possible. And then at the beginning of this year, I commissioned Paul Rimmer, a senior former civil servant, an ex-deputy director of the Chief of Defence Intelligence, to conduct an independent review. This review was concluded and reported to ministers last month. Today, I'm releasing a public version of Rimmer's review, and I'm placing a copy of that in the Library of the House. I'm very grateful to him for his work. Mr. Speaker, despite brutal human rights abuses in Afghanistan, the Rimmer review notes the passage of time, nearly 4 years since the fall of Kabul, and concludes, first, and I quote, "There is little evidence of intent by the Taliban to conduct a campaign of retribution against former officials. Second, those who pose a challenge to the Taliban rule now are at greater risk of a reaction from the regime. 3, the wealth of data inherited from the former government by the Taliban would already enable them to target individuals if they wish to do so. Which means, fourthly, he concludes, and I quote, "It is highly unlikely that merely being on the spreadsheet would be the piece of information enabling or prompting the Taliban to act." However, Rimmer is clear. He stresses the uncertainty in any judgments, and he does not rule out any risk. Yet he concludes, given this updated context, that the current policy we inherited appears, and I quote, "an extremely significant intervention to address the potentially limited net additional risk the incident likely presents." Mr. Speaker, the Rimmer review is a very significant but not the sole element in the government's decision to change policy. To change policy, to close the ARR, and to ensure that court order is lifted today. Policy concerns about proportionality, about public accountability, about cost, about fairness were also important factors to the government. And this was not a decision taken lightly. It follows a lengthy process, including the Rimmer review, detailed ministerial discussions, and repeated consultations with legal advisors. And just as I have changed government policy in light of the Rimmer review, so the High Court today, in light of the Rimmer review, ruled that there is no tenable basis for the continuation of the super injunction. Mr. Speaker, to date, 900 ARR principals are in Britain or in transit, together with 3,600 family members, at a cost of around £400 million. From today, there will be no new ARR offers of relocation to Britain. From today, the route is now closed. However, we will honour the 600 invitations already made to any named persons still in Afghanistan and their immediate family. When this nation makes a promise, we should keep it. Today, Mr. Speaker, I'm also restoring full accountability for the government's Afghan relocation scheme to Parliament. And I would expect our select committees to hold us account now through the in-depth inquiries. Let me turn, if I may, now to the practical action that we've taken as a result of this policy change and in preparation for the lifting of the court super injunction. Mr. Speaker, my first concern has been to notify as many as possible affected by the data incident and provide them with further advice. The MOD has done this morning, although I have to say to the House it has not been possible to contact every individual on the dataset due to its incomplete and out-of-date information. However, anyone who may be concerned can head to our new dedicated gov.uk website, wherein they will find more information about the data loss, further security advice, a self-checker tool which will inform them whether their application has been affected, and contact steps for the Detailed Information Services Centre, which the MOD has established. Mr. Speaker, this serious data incident should never have happened. It may have occurred 3 years ago under the previous government, but to all those whose information was compromised, I offer a sincere apology today on behalf of the British government. And I trust the Shadow Defence Secretary, as a former Defence Minister, will join me in this. Mr. Speaker, to date, 36,000 Afghans have been accepted by Britain through the range of relocation schemes. Britain has honoured the duty we owe to those who worked and fought alongside our troops in Afghanistan. The British people have welcomed them to our country, and in turn, this is their chance to rebuild their lives, their chance to contribute and to share in the prosperity of our great country. However, none of these relocation schemes can carry on in perpetuity, nor were they conceived to do so. That's why on the 1st of July, we announced that we would no longer accept new applicants to ARAP. However, I will reiterate the commitment we made then to process every outstanding ARAP application and relocate those who may prove eligible. And we will complete our commitment to continuing the review of the triples. Mr. Speaker, I recognise my statement will prompt many questions. I would have wanted to settle these matters sooner, because full accountability to Parliament and freedom of the press matter deeply to me. They're fundamental to our British way of life. However, lives may have been at stake. And I've spent many hours thinking about this decision, thinking about the safety and the lives of people I will never meet in a far-off land in which 457 of our servicemen and women lost their lives. So this weighs heavily on me, and it's why no government could take such decisions lightly without sound grounds and hard deliberations. During this last year, we have conducted and we have now completed this work. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State James Cartledge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Secretary of State both for advance side of his statement and for receipt early this morning of a hard copy of the RIMA review. And can I thank the Secretary of State and the Minister of the Armed Forces for briefing me yesterday and for briefing other parliamentary colleagues today. Furthermore, given the nature of the super injunction, Mr. Speaker, and the fact that the timing and nature of this statement relates entirely to the court's lifting of that super injunction, I also recognise that it was entirely right for the Secretary of State to update the House at the earliest opportunity and welcome the opportunity colleagues now have to scrutinise these matters. To declare an interest, Mr. Speaker, I was a minister at the MOD in August 2023 when the department first became aware of the breach. My main role being to chair one meeting on the matter in August 2023 because I was the duty minister, but thereafter being Minister for Defence Procurement and this sitting outside my portfolio, I had relatively minimal direct involvement. That said, the Secretary of State has issued an apology on behalf of the government, and I join him in that, and in recognising that this data leak should never have happened and was an unacceptable breach of all relevant data protocols. And I agree it is right that an apology is issued specifically to those whose data was compromised. It is nevertheless a fact that cannot be ignored that when this breach came to light, the immediate priority of the then government was to avoid a very specific and terrible scenario, namely, an error by an official of the British state leading to torture or even murder of persons in the dataset at the hands of what remains a brutal Taliban regime. As the RIMA review confirms, that scenario, thankfully, appears to have been avoided. Of course, the RIMA review was set up in January and reported to the Secretary of State in June, as we understand. I want to be clear, Mr. Speaker, it is entirely appropriate that the Secretary of State has sought to update the Department's understanding of the threat on the ground in Afghanistan that exists today, particularly for those persons in the data set who had previously been concluded to be at greatest risk of reprisals. However, the House will appreciate that when ministers became aware of this data breach in August 2023, we did not have the luxury of 6 months to assess the situation. As RIMA says at paragraph 53, and I quote, the review notes that the passage of time is particularly relevant. And I know that my former ministerial colleague, former Minister of the Armed Forces, James Heapy, who led the response to the leak, will have been focused entirely on what he saw as his duty of care to those at risk of reprisals, based on the threat assessment that pertained at the time. But any threat picture is constantly evolving. And as I say, I support the Secretary of State's decision to review the MOD's understanding of the threat, and given the latest situation as reported by RIMA, we support his conclusion that the Afghanistan response route, the ARR, can now be closed. Turning to the super injunction, I do entirely understand why this will be the subject of considerable interest, particularly for the newspapers and media outlets concerned. We have an independent judiciary, and it is not for me to comment on either the decision to grant the injunction in the first place, nor to lift it today. But it is surely telling that the RIMA review paragraph 56 states that planning at the time the government became aware of this breach in the summer of 2023 was based, and I quote directly, on a risk judgment that were the Taliban to secure access to the data set, the consequences for affected individuals may be serious. Had that not been the case, no doubt the court would have been less likely to grant the injunction, and certainly not a super injunction. So on the leak, can the Secretary of State confirm that this was by a civil servant and that ministers at the time took steps to change the casework procedure, i.e. not using spreadsheets sent by email, but moving to a more secure system fully within the entirely secure network? And can he confirm that although the data set was circa 18,000, only a relatively small portion of that data set was identified as being at high risk of reprisals, and only a small number have been settled here, which is why, as he stated today, the cost is around £400 million, not the figure of £7 billion that is being reported elsewhere? And can I agree with him that now that these matters are rightly in the public domain, that given the reassessment of the threat in the RIMA review, it would be wholly appropriate for the Select Committee and others to look into these matters further? Can the Secretary of State comment on one very specific item being reported? That, and I'm not referring to the person who made the leak, but another apparent third party who obtained some of the data was engaged in blackmail. Did the original Metropolitan Police investigation look at this? And if not, will he consider reopening it so that the police can have another look at that very specific point, which is very serious in its implications? Finally, we must recognise the huge role played by Afghan nationals in support of our armed forces. But any policy in this area must always be balanced against our own national interest. We support the government in closing the ARR scheme, and as we did with their decision to close the full Arab programme.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the tone in which the Shadow Defence Secretary has responded? Can I welcome him joining me in the apology on behalf of the British Government to those whose data has been compromised? And can I welcome also his acceptance that he put it's entirely appropriate for the Defence Secretary now, as part of a new government, to look to up-to-date the Department's assessment of the threat. And I am very pleased, and the House will have noted, that he supports RIMA's conclusions and my policy judgments that the Government has announced today. He is right. RIMA, in simple terms, gives us a revised, up-to-date assessment of the risk, and in particular the risk of those individuals whose data may be on that spreadsheet. And he does confirm, highly unlikely, that their name on the data set increases the risk of them being targeted. Mr. Speaker, he asked me 3 or 4 specific questions. He asked about the official. It was a defence official. I can't account for the improvements in data handling that the previous ministers might have taken. What I can say, when I did his job in that period of opposition, was that this data leak was just one of many from the Afghan schemes at the time. And what I can say is that since the election in this last year, we as a government have appointed a new Chief Information Officer. We have installed new software to securely share data, and we have also completed a comprehensive review of the legacy Afghan data on the casework system. On the question of the £7 billion, Mr. Speaker, which I think he may have picked up from court papers, this was a previous estimate. It is not related simply to the Afghan recovery route. It is an estimate of the total cost of all government Afghan schemes for the entire period in which they may operate. And the significance of the decision that I've announced today means that that cost to the taxpayer as a result of the policy decisions we've taken today, compared to simply continuing the policy and schemes we'd inherited, means that the taxpayer will pay 1.2 billion less over this period. It means that around 9,500 fewer Afghans will come to this country, and above all, it means that we have restored proper accountability in this House and proper freedom of the media.
Chair of the Select Committee, Tamerji Singh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement, welcome it, and indeed his intent to now inject parliamentary transparency and scrutiny. However, this whole data breach situation is a mess and is wholly unacceptable. As I mentioned to the Minister for the Armed Forces during our recent secret briefing, that I am certainly minded to recommend to my Defence Committee colleagues that we thoroughly investigate to ascertain what has actually transpired here, given the serious ramifications on so many levels. However, as things stand, notwithstanding the contents of the RIMA review, how confident is my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, that the Afghans affected, many of whom bravely supported our service personnel, will not be at risk of recriminations and reprisals?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can only recommend that he reads in full the public version of the RIMA report that I've published today. The conclusions and the updated risk assessment that RIMA sets out, taking an up-to-date view, recognising that the situation in Afghanistan is now nearly 4 years on from the point at which the Taliban took control, recognising also that the present regime sees those who may threaten the regime itself now as a greater threat to their operation than any perhaps former government official or serving official. So I'd recommend that he reads that, and I expect, as the Defence Select Committee Chair, he will want to take full advantage of this restored parliamentary accountability. I've always believed that our Select Committee system in this House is perfectly capable and actually better suited to many of the in-depth inquiries that often get punted into public inquiries or punted into calls for public inquiries. And I hope my honourable friend would have noted the fact that the Shadow Defence Secretary also endorsed that view.
Why the Liberal Democrats spokesperson?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I also thank the Minister of the Armed Forces for his briefing on this issue this morning. I'm pleased that this House now has the opportunity to scrutinise this alarming data breach. And it's right that the then government moved to introduce a new scheme to try to minimise the risk to the Afghan soldiers and their families who were caught up in this breach, of the 18,714 individuals in total. It's the very least that we owe them, given the sacrifices they made to support our campaign in Afghanistan. And I welcome the apologies from both sides of the House as a result of this data breach. But it does raise serious questions about how this was allowed to happen under the Conservatives' watch and the heightened level of risk it has created for those Afghans involved. So can the Minister confirm what steps have been taken to address the root cause of this breach and to ensure that it cannot happen again? Reporting this afternoon from the Financial Times suggested that an original relocation scheme considered for all 25,000 Afghan personnel could cost up to £7 billion. So will the Secretary of State confirm what assessment his department has made of that figure and why this was kept hidden from the public? The immediate priority must be to ensure the safety of all those individuals caught up in this breach. So what assurances can the Secretary of State provide that lifting of this super injunction now doesn't heighten any dangers for those individuals concerned? And what steps is he taking to ensure that the individuals whose data was leaked are aware of the incident? What additional support is now being provided to them directly now that the case is in the public domain? And in light of these developments, can the Secretary of State outline when the casework and final relocations under this and the ARAP scheme will be completed by?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome her response? Can I say that I actually provided answers to the House for 2 or 3 of her questions directly to the Shadow Defence Secretary on the steps that we've taken to ensure that one can never say never, but one can, and I am more confident than I was 12 months ago about the reduced risk of data losses and data breaches in future. I've also given a response on the 7 billion figure. The estimated full costs of all Afghan schemes that will run to their completion from start to finish because of the savings derived from the policy decisions we've taken today will be between 5.5 and 6 billion pounds. The cost of the ARR scheme to date, the cost and the sums committed to bring the 900 principals and their immediate families that are in Britain or in transit is around 400 million, and I expect a similar sum to be the cost of those still to come. Mr. Speaker, finally on RIMA, I think I said in my statement to the House that RIMA recognises the uncertainties, recognises the brutal nature of the Afghan Taliban regime, recognises that there can never be any risk, there can never be no risk in any judgments and decisions like this. It's one of the reasons that this is a decision that the government and I have taken with hard deliberation and serious intent. And, Mr. Speaker, I hope that the House will back it this afternoon.
Dame Emily Thornbury.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. May I begin by saying I'm grateful to the ministerial team for the early briefing that I got on this matter, which gave me an opportunity to read a report that came out from the FAC under the chairmanship of the Right Honourable Member for Tunbridge and Malling. It was begun in September 21 and the report came out in 22. It's called Missing in Action, UK Leadership and the Withdrawal from Afghanistan. It was excoriating. The manner of the withdrawal of international forces from Afghanistan was a disaster, a betrayal of our allies and weakens the trust that helps to keep British people safe. It said the government should keep better records securely held on locally employed staff. And we've heard this is one of the many data losses from Arup. To ensure that any evacuation can be carried out more effectively, it should devise a policy based on clear and fair principles about the assistance which will be offered to local partners in the event of a security deterioration, and report to us when that has been done. I hope that such a policy has been developed, that more lessons have been learned, and that the ministers will report to my committee about where we are now.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that ministers will report to her committee if she invites us to do so, and she's right to make that big argument that anyone providing data to the British government has a right to expect that personal data to be stored securely, handled safely, and not to be subject to the sort of loss or breach that too often we saw with the early days of the Afghan relocation schemes.
Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
I commend the Secretary of State for his honesty and agree with everything he says in his statement. It was an appalling mess, but part of the original sin of us intervening militarily and then scuffling out. Can I take it on a wider point that we've learnt our lesson now, and we've got over the sort of liberal imperial itch of the Cameron and Blair areas to intervene militarily in ungovernable countries such as Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria and Libya? Let's now just move on, but I support what he said.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his remarks. I'm certainly grateful to his for his support for my statement this afternoon. Although he hasn't said it, he's a big champion of press freedom, and I expect that he also recognises that an important part of our decision has been this period in which we've seen no public knowledge, no media reporting, no parliamentary accountability, and we set that right today.
Louise Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a former veteran of the war in Afghanistan, I was appalled to watch the chaotic mismanagement following the fall of Kabul that left Afghans that had served alongside us, alongside our troops, and those who'd worked so hard for a better Afghan, dangerously exposed. This was a situation that I had feared would happen, and I could see coming even when I served in Afghanistan in 2017. The fact is, the previous government had plenty of warning that this situation could happen and failed to plan properly for it. This data breach joins the litany of other data breaches, delays and failures of our allies, and will the Minister therefore agree with me that we must give our fullest support to those Afghans so they can rebuild a new life here in the UK?
Secretary of State.
I do indeed, Mr. Speaker, and I know from Afghan families that were relocated in the early days into our area, my own constituency in South Yorkshire. It was the voices of members of both sides of the House here speaking up in exactly the same terms that she has there, recognising the debt this country owes to many of those who worked alongside or served with our forces, that made the very difficult job that our forces undertook in Afghanistan possible in the first place, and provided a warm welcome and continue to do so to those Afghans we're offering a new home and the chance to rebuild their lives and contribute to our country.
Lincoln John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the Secretary of State's statement and the tone of voice that he delivered it in. I commanded the Scots Guards in 2010 in Afghanistan at the high water mark of violence. I was very well served by Naz and Mukhtar, and I will always be grateful to both the Ministry of Defence for getting them to Britain and to the communities in the country who have welcomed them to their new lives here. I do just want to focus in on a particular phrase that the Secretary of State used. The Shadow Defence Secretary asked whether it was a civil servant who carried out the leak. The Secretary of State said it was a defence official, and the Times is reporting that it was a soldier. I do think it is worth clarifying exactly whether it was a civil servant, a SPAD or a soldier, because conflating the term defence official to cover members of the armed forces is something which might come back to bite the Secretary of State if he continues to do it.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, this was a data breach that took place 3.5 years ago under the decision and leadership of the previous government and previous defence ministers. the challenge I faced, the challenge this government faced, was far bigger than the actions of one official that long ago. And my full focus since the election in July last year has been to get to grips with the costs, the proportionality or the disproportionality of the schemes in place, and this lack of accountability to Parliament, freedom of the press and public knowledge. And it is that set of factors that has taken up my time and my attention.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I noted that the Shadow Secretary of State made great play about the changes and the extra safeguards the previous governments have put in place, the ministers have put in place for this breach. But I also noted that Mr. Speaker, that the Secretary of State said that he'd had to make more changes and introduce new software. That suggests to me that it wasn't the changes that had been put in place by the previous government were not good enough. And can I ask him clearly, in terms of it was 18 months after the incident, who had knowledge of this in those 18 months that this data breach had taken place before it reached ministers? And how was there no checks on anyone who had access to that sort of data using it properly within the department?
Sir State. Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend poses questions to me in the House this afternoon that I simply can't answer. They date from a period that was well before I took office, and as he above all will appreciate, as a new minister, you have no access to the policy advice, the legal assessments, any of the papers or even the threat assessments that the previous government and ministers may have commissioned. That sort of subject, if I may, is, I think, proper material for the committee on which he serves in such a distinguished way on the Defence Select Committee, perhaps to take a deeper look and to call witnesses that may be in a better position to answer those questions than I can this afternoon. And finally, on the question of software, I'm afraid I'm one of the last people to be able to give authoritative views on the question of cybersecurity and up-to-date software. But I think it must be in the nature of this that such requirements for new software, for constant updating, is indeed constant. And so the fact that we have taken the steps in the last 12 months that I and our experts have regarded as necessary doesn't necessarily mean that the steps taken by previous ministers were inadequate. But what I can say, of course, is that in the Shadow Defence Secretary's position, during that period of opposition, we were aware we exposed some of the building backlogs in casework, the regular data breaches and the broken promises, sad to say, particularly in the early years, that too often characterised these Afghan relocation schemes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too welcome the statement given by the Secretary of State today, and as a member of the Defence Select Committee, I'm looking forward to giving this the due scrutiny that it deserves. So I won't go into the things within the actual report, but I think it's important to clarify. Is the Secretary of State also able to say whether the data breach in question, as in the past, or maybe now, be putting any serving members of the UK Armed Forces at risk?
So State. I look forward to being called and giving evidence to his committee, if indeed it does launch such an inquiry. To the best of my knowledge and belief, no serving member of our armed forces is put at risk by the data loss.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's staggering to hear yet another serious data breach under the previous Conservative government. Would the Secretary of State, well, they can bicker from the other side, but it was clearly a mistake when they were in power. Would the Secretary of State agree with me that we've inherited a chaotic and poorly managed system, and can he tell us what systems have been put in place to correct this so we won't see more systems where you are emailing an Excel spreadsheet absolutely beggars belief. Can we confirm that this would never happen again?
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend is absolutely right in the criticism she levels, but I would just say to her, I don't think any minister can stand here, or no chief executive of any organisation can stand say with guarantee there will never be a data breach, a data loss, or a data error in that way. What I can say is we've taken steps to reduce the risk for that, and that we no longer do any caseworking on spreadsheets, which was in the early days of this scheme, the technology that was available, and part of the problem, I think, for this inadvertent mistake made by the defence official.
Sir Julian.
What worries me more than the lifting of this super injunction is the fact that we've closed down all the Afghan schemes at the very time that undocumented Afghans who felt it necessary to flee to Iran and to Pakistan are being rounded up for forcible repatriation to an Afghanistan led by the Taliban. I understand that the investigation over our obligation to the Triples, the special forces that our forces trained, will be continuing, and I welcome that. Can the Secretary of State confirm that despite the closure of the schemes, anybody who is found to have worked very closely with our armed forces, who is in imminent danger, can still be rescued and admitted to this country?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, it is more than 4 years since the previous government, the previous Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, launched on behalf of this country the Afghan relocations and assistance policy, with absolute full support across this House. There has been ample time for anyone who could conceivably believe they might qualify to make their application. That scheme and none of these schemes were ever conceived or designed to last in perpetuity, which is why we've closed them at the beginning of this month to any new applicants, which is why I've taken the decision based on RIMA and the other factors I've identified to end the ARR scheme today. But on the Arab applicants, the sort of Afghans that the Right Honourable Gentleman is concerned about, where there are applications in our system remaining to be processed, we will complete that job. And on the Triples, we will complete the second phase of the review that we've given a commitment to them and to this House to undertake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Secretary of State's support for parliamentary transparency and for the work of the committee corridor in this House, and I have no doubt that my excellent colleagues who chair the various committees responsible will do a thorough job of examining this, and hope that he will then facilitate the sharing of any information that may need to be handled in a sensitive manner. When the Labour was last in government, there were a number of breaches of this nature. His predecessor of his asked to be notified of every one, and most of those were human error. So it's great that we're updating the IT systems and dealing with that security. But can he just touch on what elements are going to be put in place to guard against that human error which inevitably creeps in?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, for functions and roles like this, having sound, secure caseworker software, having good training and proper protocols, all of which are now in place, greatly minimises the risk that anything like this data breach that we now find out took place in February 2022 is likely to happen again. And most importantly, I think it also helps to provide the sort of reassurance that anyone should have, that if they are providing data to the British government, to the British state, that should be held and handled securely.
Mark Pritchard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you're Defence Secretary, forgive me, I do detect some wriggling. And the fact is, he justifies this super injunction not telling Parliament, not telling the press, not telling the public, and unbelievably not telling those Afghans who were potentially in harm's way. And isn't it the case that his argument is actually very thin? Because even the MOD itself admits that Taliban-aligned individuals already had access to the database. So not telling those Afghans they're under harm's way is quite frankly unbelievable. And the precedent of a super junction is very concerning for this place. How do we know there's not another super junction about another leak? But of course he couldn't tell us, could he?
Secretary of State.
Well, I can say to the right honourable gentleman, if there is another super injunction, I've not been read in. But in his own characteristic way, he makes a really important point about how unprecedented, how uncomfortable, how in many ways unconscionable it is to have a super injunction like this in place. I hope in light of that, he will accept what has been a difficult decision to review the risks, the costs, the details of the scheme, the legal hearings that have taken place have all been components of an important policy decision I've been able to announce to the House today, and I hope you will back that.
Catherine Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My husband served in Afghanistan and has always felt keenly the debt that our country owes to those who worked alongside and supported our forces. And I know that many of my constituents who also served there feel the same way. Does the Defence Secretary share my concern that if we fail to honour our debts, why would people in future conflicts trust us and support our troops? And does he agree with me that it is the right thing to do that we offer a warm welcome to Afghans who come to our country seeking sanctuary?
100%, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend speaks so plainly, so forcefully and so passionately. And it was one of the things that struck me most 4 or 5 years ago in the Shadow Defence Secretary's role, as we debated the obligation to put in place the ARAP scheme, that those who felt fiercest were understandably those who had served. Those who had, in this House, had been part of the 140,000 British men and women over 20 years that had served in Afghanistan, because they recognised just what a debt this country and they owe to people like those that her husband speaks about.
Gentlemen.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Secretary of State's pledge to restore full accountability for the government's relocation schemes. But I am saddened that this is the first opportunity that we've had to talk about the closure of the ACRS and ARAP schemes on the floor of this House, given that those were announced by written statement at very short notice only 2 weeks ago. Can I ask a couple of specific questions? On the ARR that we've only found out about today, he mentioned 600 invitations that will be honoured. For those who were not accepted and part of the breach, are they aware of that? On ARAP, it has been closed to new applications, but again, and I've asked the Minister for the Armed Services about this before, what is the communication strategy for updating them? And on ACRS, it was never open to vulnerable women and civil rights defenders that it was aimed to protect. Again, what communication will the government have with those individuals who are in hiding either in Afghanistan or third countries?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, we made the statement about the closure to new applicants of the ARAP scheme and the ACRS scheme that the Home Office runs on the 1st of July. The Honourable Lady will have had opportunity since then to raise those matters in this House if she chose to do so. And on the information to those who may be affected, we will honour those invitations that have been issued to 600 of those ARR individuals, and to everyone else on the data set. We have communicated that the latest position this morning. We are offering access to further advice through the government.uk designated area of the website, and that includes steps that individuals can take, if they wish, to get in touch with our Information Services Centre, a dedicated centre set up by the MOD in order to deal with questions and concerns that people may have.
Stella Quiz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a very shocking story that the Secretary of State has told us today, and I pay testament to his commitment to transparency about it. I would say that sadly for many of us, for whom that period of time will never leave us and our offices dealing with the hundreds of people ringing in, desperately distraught about what might happen to family relatives, it doesn't surprise us, because I have to be honest with the Secretary of State, this matter is not closed. I join with the member from New Forest East in being desperately concerned that we still have people who would have qualified under these schemes, but because of failures like this, fled Afghanistan or tried to go to other countries, we tried to raise with ministers but could not get meetings with them, and now we discovered there were secret schemes. He will understand that right now MPs' offices across this country will be hearing this and worried that again they will get those phone calls, that again they will have those queries. He's right that there must be parliamentary scrutiny. Can he just assure us that there will be additional resources to support us in supporting our constituents who will come forward, and that he will keep an open mind that even 4 years later there will still be cases that are relevant to this scheme that should be heard and should be giving sanctuary here if we are to honour our debt to those people who kept our forces safe?
Secretary of State.
Well, can I pay tribute to my honourable friend? She has been one of the most active, most assiduous members of this House in championing the cause of constituents who and others who may be trying to get access to the scheme. I just say to her, this is almost 4 years since, it's beyond 4 years since the Arab scheme was first established. There are still 22,000 Arab applicants whose applications will be processed, and where there is eligibility established, they will be offered the relocation that this country has undertaken to give them. And those applicants need not have applied from Afghanistan. Many indeed have. And for the Arab scheme from the outset, one of its most important features with the Taliban taking over in Afghanistan has been that it's been former female Afghans, female Afghans who formerly have worked alongside, and some even served in the Afghan forces alongside our own, that have been potentially at greatest risk, for whom the offer that this country has made to relocate to this country, rebuild and re-establish a life here has been most important.
Sir Geoffrey Cliftonborough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I commend the Secretary of State for his calm and sensible way that he's announced the change in government policy today. Mr. Speaker, I can already announce to the House that since a briefing earlier today, I've made preliminary arrangements for MOD officials to come and address the PAC to examine the cost implications, the 400 million spent so far, and I think the Secretary of State said in parenthesis there will be another 400 million for the 600 based in Afghanistan at the moment who have received invitations under the scheme. Can he give me and the House an assurance that those 600 people who must be in some danger, if they do need assistance, that will be rapidly provided?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman is very fast off the mark, and I'm glad that he's already issued his invitation to his committee. So he's asking for figures as chair of the PAC. So the cost of what has been spent and committed in order to bring and get into transit the 900 principals eligible under ARR plus their immediate family members to Britain is around £400 million. For the remaining members of the ARR and the immediate families who've been issued invitations, we expect something similar again. But because of the policy decisions, and he may want to probe this in his committee, that we've been able to announce, and the changes we've been able to announce to the policy and the programmes we inherited, it means that the taxpayer should be paying over the next few years 1.2 billion less, and that around 9,500 fewer Afghans will come to this country.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the government decision to support the lifting of the super injunction today and bring this awful matter properly into the public domain. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that it's right and proper that this issue now is fully scrutinised by Parliament?
Secretary of State. Mr Speaker, I do indeed, and one of the important features for me in being able to make this statement, to set out the details before the House this afternoon, has been that we are now restoring the proper parliamentary accountability of government ministers and decisions we take and schemes that we run and spending that we commit on behalf of the taxpayer to this House. And I look forward to this House in this chamber, but I hope also in the appropriate select committee or committees will undertake that proper constitutional role in a way they've not been able to do so without being constrained over the last 2 years.
Dave Dugan.
Mr Speaker, a difficult statement for the Secretary of State and no mistake. He says in his statement, though, that this was a breach of very strict data protection protocols. Well, on the basis of this breach and the other breaches around Afghan resettlement, clearly those protocols were not strict enough. He's declined to say whether it was a contractor or whether it was a civil servant or a service personnel. I don't think anyone in this House wants to know who it was. I would like to know how senior that person was, because if it was a junior member of MOD staff, then that is, the delinquency is both systemic and personal. But if it's a senior member of MOD staff, the delinquency is purely personal on the basis of their knowledge and seniority. In this instance, it was brave Afghans, but what reassurance can he give us that brave personnel of the UK forces would not be similarly compromised by a level of delinquency similar to this in the MOD? And why the synchronicity with the lifting of the super injunction and the ending of the schemes? Isn't it more likely that we should walk a mile in the people who have fled the Afghan regime and think that maybe we need an ARR plus wash-up to get these people out of danger if it becomes a reality?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I wanted this House to hear the policy decisions that I had made and wanted to announce. I wanted this House to hear that first. The judge, aware of the decisions that the government had taken, the announcements I was planning to make today, has taken his decision to lift the super injunction and deliver his court judgment at noon this afternoon. Look, on the question of the individual responsible for that original data loss, that's not something I'm prepared to pursue in this House. It's not something that was, it's clearly the overarching responsibility of ministers at the time. And I would just say to him, my full focus has been to get to grips with what we inherited, to take a fresh look at the policy that was in place, and to be able to be in a position with the proper degree of deliberation and sound grounds to be able to come to this House this afternoon and announce the changes that I've done.
Mark Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm sure, like many members of the House, I feel a sense of anger that once again the Afghan people have been betrayed. I thank the Secretary of State for his candour in his responses and for lifting the super injunction, which will allow proper parliamentary scrutiny. But will he assure me that 3 questions in particular will be answered? 1, how a year was allowed to pass between the initial leak and it being uncovered. 2, how an email with a spreadsheet attached was considered a serious way to send around what effectively amounted to a kill list of Afghans for the Taliban. And 3, it has been referred to the role of James Heapy in overseeing this. What role, if any, was held by the 2 Secretaries of State for Defence at the time, one who served until August 2023 and one who served from August 2023, to my mind, either side of the information coming to light? If we do not get to the bottom of those questions, we do an immense disservice to the British people, but worse, an immense disservice to the Afghans who've been let down once again.
State.
Well, my honourable friend signals some of the areas that the necessary parliamentary scrutiny will consider. I have to say to him it was 18 months, not 1 year, between the original data loss and it first being discovered and brought to Minister's attention in August 2023. It was a spreadsheet. Sorry, his second point was this. This was a period in which officials were and the department was working at breakneck speed to put in place schemes that were novel, schemes that were urgently needed, and clearly that sort of spreadsheet software is inappropriate for this case working system and is no longer used in that way. And then finally, I just would say he's asking about the role of my predecessors. It was Grant Shapps, who was the Defence Secretary, who oversaw the design, the extension, the establishment of the ARR scheme.
Neil O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As well as risking lives, this extraordinary error has cost taxpayers huge sums. The Secretary of State says it will now cost 1.2 billion less, but what will be the total cost of all these schemes after that? First, given the extraordinary lack of transparency that this Parliament has been subjected to and voters to, will the Secretary of State agree to publish the legal advice that led to the expansion of the ARR and other schemes so we can have a proper discussion about it? And second, the Secretary of State did not mention any official resigning or being sacked over this extraordinary episode, and I think my constituents will find that quite surprising. Will he name the number of people who have resigned or been sacked over this extraordinary error? And if nobody has resigned or been sacked, does he agree that that is the wrong thing?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not in a position to make a decision about publishing the legal advice that led the previous government and Defence Secretary to extend the scheme. It's not legal advice that I have had access to or seen. And I just say to him on the question of costs, his right honourable friend, the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, will do that. He's not in his place now, actually, but he will do the job on this. I can confirm for this House this afternoon that the total cost of all Afghan relocation schemes to date for those 36,000 Afghans that have been brought to this country is around 2.7 billion. The expected cost over the entire life of those schemes to bring anyone who may subsequently be proved eligible for these schemes is between 5.5 and 6 billion pounds, and that is at least 1.2 billion less because of the policy decisions that I've taken this afternoon.
Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the Secretary of State for his openness and transparency and his apology. And whilst I'm on my feet, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank Portsmouth City Council for their involvement in Afghan resettlement schemes, many of those who served along my constituency members in Portsmouth North. Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the decision today and the time this government has rightly taken to consider all of the options and examine the complexities through the RIMA review, the cost to taxpayers and the safety of those affected, alongside the need for transparency, openness in this House, to the press and also to the public. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, does the Secretary of State agree with me that we must, as a government, reaffirm our commitment to public transparency?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I do agree with my honourable friend. This House is doing so this afternoon in response to the statement that I've set out to the House. And can I say to her local council in Portsmouth, the role they are playing and councils across the country are playing in making sure that there is a warm welcome and a unified Afghan resettlement programme in place for those Afghans and their families that we are welcoming into this country is remarkable. We thank them for that, and we as a central government and this House couldn't see these schemes operate effectively without our local councils.
Duncan Smith.
Madam Speaker, I commend the Secretary of State's statement today. I'm not going to dwell on the past because that will be something I'm sure the Defence Committee will have a look at and other committees. I want to bring him into where the future goes on this. Now, in closing all these schemes, there are still people out there who may not recognise the statement in this report that says no longer a widespread campaign of targeting individuals. I have one in my mind. The Minister of State knows exactly who I'm referring to, one Sami Atai, who is has fled and is in hiding in Pakistan His brother has been arrested in their pursuit of him. He didn't get directly employed by the British government because he couldn't have done for security reasons. But testaments from people like General Ollie Brown and others all say that he saved lives for British servicemen and women. We owe people like that, surely, a debt of honour and gratitude for their work. So I simply put it to him, could he now look at what might replace the schemes that he's got rid of, which were inflexible, very narrow, and often left out those who really did this government a service. And I'd be grateful if he'd come up with some flexible idea in due course that allows some of these people, possibly, to seek succour here in the United Kingdom.
State.
I hesitate to be too blunt with the right honourable gentleman because I have a great deal of respect for him. But with any applicant, if they're not eligible for the criteria of the scheme that this House has approved and the government has in place and operates, that can really only lead to one decision. And I don't want to raise false hopes, as he encourages me to look in a creative way at other options. My honourable friend, the Armed Forces Minister, is very familiar with this case. We will look at it again, but I don't want to raise false hopes for him or the man that he describes so vividly and with such concern to the House this afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm proud that Bracknell Forest is involved in the Afghan resettlement programme and is offering transitional support to the brave Afghans who risk their lives to support our troops. But any scheme like this depends on public trust. So it's concerning to hear that under the Conservative government, instead we had secrecy, security breaches and a super injunction. Will the Secretary of State take this opportunity to reconfirm two commitments? Firstly, that this government will continue to honour the moral obligation we owe to those Afghans who fought alongside our troops. And secondly, that we will do so in a way which reaffirms this government's commitment to public transparency.
Secretary of State.
I will indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, both the continuing commitment to honour the obligations and the duty that we owe to those who served or worked alongside our forces through the ARAP scheme. We will complete the processing of any applications that are outstanding, and for any who prove eligible, they will get the full relocation and resettlement support. And I'm glad this afternoon, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be able to restore a degree of that parliamentary scrutiny and transparency that our system in Britain depends on.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank the Secretary of State for his statement. In that, he said, when this nation makes a promise, we should keep it. And I agree. In the chaos of withdrawal, my constituent, who left under ARAP, was made a promise by British officials that his pregnant wife could follow him. 2 years later, we have still not kept that promise. My constituent's wife and child continue to move around in Afghanistan to evade the Taliban, and my constituent is so desperate that he is talking about returning to Afghanistan despite the risk to him to be reunited with them. The Minister for the Armed Forces knows this case, and he has told me that the MOD will not consider it and is now a matter for the Home Office. So in light of this, will the Secretary of State repeat his commitment that our nation should keep its promise to my constituent? And will he undertake to engage with the Home Secretary to discuss how her department will ensure that cases like this are afforded the proper treatment in light of our commitment to the Afghan people?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I will take a look at the case he raises, and if required, I will also speak to my right honourable friend and colleague, the Home Secretary.
Josh Fenton-Green.
Deputy Speaker, can I start by paying tribute to all of the diplomats and armed forces involved in what is clearly an extraordinary operation. It's a stark reminder that our asylum system, despite demagoguery sometimes in this place, often represents a sacred duty to those who put their lives at risk for us and our allies. Can the Minister confirm to me that while the ARR is now closed, we will continue to process cases of those in the ARAP scheme since the 1st of July, including one that I've raised with officials?
Secretary of State.
Yes, my honourable friend speaks very powerfully. Where there are outstanding ARAP applications, they will be processed. Where there are outstanding triples cases, that fall into the second phase of the review, that review will be completed, and where there is eligibility for ARAP entitlement established, that will be honoured.
Objecting.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the Defence Secretary for his statement today, but I think it does ask a lot more questions than it answers. So could the Secretary of State outline exactly how this data set came to be accidentally emailed, and can he confirm that it was indeed an accident? What was the security classification of that data set? And who was the data set emailed to, given that it is now feared to be in the hands of the Taliban? And I appreciate he might not be able to answer some of those questions, but given this happened now 3 years ago, what level of investigation has actually taken place, and can that be published?
Secretary of State.
I think I reported to the House earlier on, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the incident under the previous ministers was reported to the Metropolitan Police. It was also reported to the Information Commissioner. The Met Police deemed no criminal investigation or further action to be required. The Information Commissioner still has this case. We're working closely with them, and I would expect before too long some conclusions and judgments from the Information Commissioner's office. But I simply can't say when.
Madam Ward.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I ran an aid agency when the Taliban came to power in 2021 and vividly recall trying to get the then government to help with the evacuation of brave Afghan colleagues, aid workers and human rights defenders under huge threat, people who had served humanity. I remember the confusion that reigned within the UK government, and to hear that the lives of tens of thousands of Afghan civilians were further put at risk by this data breach is deeply shocking. The Defence Secretary will know that under the Taliban, Afghan women and girls are enduring the world's most severe women's rights crisis. Does he agree with me that the UK must do all we can to support the women and girls of Afghanistan in realising their right to equality?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I do, and where female Afghanis are eligible for the schemes, it's been important that they've been able to apply, and we've been able to offer them the same relocation and resettlement as others. She speaks with great authority as well as passion about that period in Afghanistan. 4 years ago, as the Taliban were taking over, as Kabul fell, her characterising of policy confusion, programme failure is exactly what was going on in the British government at that time, sad to say.
Ben Lake.
I thank the Secretary of State for his statement, and he will know that communities in Wales across the UK have been proud to welcome those Afghans and their families who have served alongside UK personnel. Many colleagues have raised concern about the Afghans who might remain in Afghanistan or in adjacent countries who may still be in danger for the services rendered. And so can I ask the Secretary of State, how confident can we be that all those in severe and imminent danger of reprisals will receive invitations for resettlement?
Secretary of State.
Those that have received the invitations will have those honoured. But I would just say to him, the concerns that he may have about the assessment of risk in Afghanistan, I'd recommend that he reads Paul Rimmer's report. It is comprehensive, it's up to date, it inevitably contains some uncertainties. It identifies the risks that are inevitably there in any policy judgments that a government minister like me must take. But I would also reinforce the points he made about the welcome and the pride in which the Welsh people did then and still do now embrace those Afghans that come to rebuild their lives in our country.
Mary Linden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituent has an active application to bring members of his family currently in a third country to safety in the UK. The MOD has advised him to assume that their data has been compromised, which is deeply concerning given the nature of the work he used to undertake. He has been told that this third country cannot be supported even though his family couldn't be safe in Afghanistan. So can the Secretary of State help to ensure that his case is accelerated given the further danger this data leak may have put his family in?
Secretary of State.
If my honourable friend writes to me with the details of the case that she cites to the House this afternoon, I will certainly take a hard look at it.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State very much for his well-chosen, careful, contrite words with the tone that this House would appreciate on the day that it's been put forward. So thank you for that. As an MP who has often decried the abandonment of those Afghanistanis who helped to secure safety for our troops and whose job put them in the firing line, I have to say that I must agree with the principle of doing the right thing and being a nation that is seen globally as supporting those who support us. The question of secrecy to this House is critical, and the Secretary of State has outlined that. Does the Secretary of State agree that the actions of government must always and totally be to protect those who were put in harm's way, and the principle of what is always right to do? I think Madam, I think of my constituent who served along with our forces in Afghanistan, and whose friend in Afghanistan, Afghani, who hides in Pakistan with his wife and 3 children. I think of him and the fear he's under. And I wonder, would the Secretary of State oblige me, please, if you don't mind, if I could send you those details relevant to that gentleman and his family, to ensure that the help that we should be giving him actually takes place. I think it's something that my constituent wants. It's what I want as his MP, and that's what that person wants.
State.
I appreciate the way that the Honourable Gentleman has raised that in the House, his concerns about this particular case, and if he does write to me with the details, I will take a hard look at it.
Final question, Alex Ballington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I twice served in Afghanistan alongside some of the bravest soldiers, judges and women's rights defenders I've met. And after the fall of Kabul, I was based in Pakistan with the FCDO, where I was involved in the evacuation from Afghanistan. At that time, despite the excellent work of people who served in op pitting, we saw many mistakes made by the last government, including dogs being prioritised ahead of people. This new data breach that was held secret for years is just the latest embarrassment of that evacuation. So can I ask the Secretary of State, will he consider a select committee inquiry, not just into the particular breaches in this case, but to the entire Afghan relocation system, which has failed so many times?
Secretary of State.
Well, one of the great joys of this House is that the depth and breadth of experience that members on all sides bring to debates, and I applaud my honourable friend and the insights that he brings from his own experience in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I just say to him, it is certainly not for government ministers to define the terms of any inquiry that a select committee of this House may choose to undertake. That will be a matter for those committees, quite properly, and if government ministers are summoned and required to account and give evidence, we certainly will.
That is the end of the statement on Afghanistan. 2 points of order. I'll go to Sarah Owen first. Point of order.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Over the weekend, a member of staff in the Commons, Mobeen Hussain MBE, was publicly defamed by several Conservative MPs, including members of the front bench online. Following threats of legal action, the defamatory posts were deleted by some, but the damage was already done. It not only does reputational damage, but given the current discourse, brings serious harm and potentially risk of life. What advice does the Speaker's office have to members of this House and the other place who abuse the power dynamic of their elected office to openly defame a young staffer who also works in this House, while quietly deleting their tweets without an apology? Does this fall short of the standards expected for those who serve in this House, and would it be proper for them to apologise?
I'm grateful to the honourable member for giving notice of her point of order. The Chair is not responsible for members' comments on social media, but I'm sure the table office will be able to advise on how to pursue the matter further. Point of order, Paul Foster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday in Westminster Hall, the Northern Ireland Veterans Petition debate took place. Being mindful this is an exceptionally sensitive and emotive issue, Westminster Hall was at full capacity and we had many veterans in attendance and many more watching online. Does the Speaker feel it is appropriate conduct for the Shadow Secretary of State for Defence, the member for South Suffolk, to shout across the floor that I, as a military veteran, discussing emotive and exceptionally challenging veteran issues should, and I quote, show some courage. Clearly audible for all to hear. Madam Deputy Speaker, given the nature and importance of this issue we were attempting to debate, given it was shouted from a sedentary position, given the Honourable Member is a Shadow Secretary of State for Defence, and given I and many colleagues found this to be wholly inappropriate and insulting to infer I lack courage, do you feel this is acceptable parliamentary language? Thank you.
I am grateful to the Honourable Member for giving notice of his point of order, and I believe for confirming that he also notified the Honourable Member for South Suffolk. The remarks he refers to were not recorded in Hansard, but I will remind all Honourable Members that good temper and moderation are the characteristics of parliamentary language, and that heckling from a sedentary position from either side of the House does nothing to enhance the quality of debate. Okay, we now go on to... Do the front bench wish to shuffle out before we go on to the next bit of business? Thank you. Presentation of Bill, Secretary of State David Lammy.
Diego Garcia Military Base and British Indian Ocean Territory Bill.
Second reading what day?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. I now go on to the 10-minute rule motion, human fertilisation and embryology. I come to Dame Caroline Dinage.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about the regulation of online providers of fertility and certain ancillary services by the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority and for connected purposes. Madam Deputy Speaker, having a child is variously viewed as one of the most life-changing, exhausting, expensive, thankless, frustrating, but ultimately magical and rewarding things we ever do in our lives. My own two sons sometimes drive me round the bend, but I quite literally love them more than anything in the world. And for many people, having a child requires a form of fertility treatment. In fact, 1 in 6 couples in Britain is affected by infertility problems. Over 52,000 people accessed fertility treatment in 2023. That's the most recent year that statistics are available. For perspective, that's up from 6,000 in 1991. In the past 25 years, the proportion of children being born by IVF has doubled. The regulator for the fertility industry, the HFEA, reports that there are now enough children born by IVF for there to be one in every classroom around the UK. And that's for a number of reasons. Since 1991, it's worth celebrating that social attitudes towards women getting into and staying in work have progressed even further. There are now 10% more women in employment in that time, but sometimes building a successful career can make it harder to build a family. 1 in 10 fertility treatments are undertaken by single women, with an average age of those women slightly older at 36. And with the proportion of young adults in the UK identifying as lesbian, gay or bisexual doubling in the last 5 years, the government amended the law, which regulates fertility access for the first and only time in 2008, to remove the barriers to female same-sex couples. And that's what we're here today to discuss, Madam Deputy Speaker. Apart from that one change, regulation has remained static, while industry and attitudes and lifestyles have raced ahead. The Human Fertility and Embryology Act is a piece of legislation that regulates fertility clinics. And despite the fertility landscape constantly modernising and moving with the times, that piece of legislation has remained largely unchanged since it was passed in 1990, 35 years ago. The failure of this regulatory regime to adequately oversee the uniquely high-stakes world of modern fertility treatment was thrown into sharp relief recently with the unexpected closure of Apricity Fertility. Now, Apricity acted as a hub which connected parents to the very complex web of fertility services. It was effectively a digital concierge service, linking women with partner clinics and offering advice and support. It didn't actually provide any of the medical services itself. But days before Christmas, on the 20th of December, Apricity Fertility notified customers that they would be ceasing all operations from the 1st of January. So while families across the country were opening their Christmas presents, hundreds of Apricity customers were opening emails that would ruin their Christmas and leave them in limbo at a very crucial point in their fertility treatment, including women who were just about to start their IVF injections. Patients scrambled to seek confirmation from clinics that they could continue with their treatment. Even a month's delay, as we know, can massively affect the chance of a successful cycle. In many cases, having already spent every single penny that they had in the world in the pursuit of having a baby, some were told by their insurers that they'd have to pay thousands more up front to be able to continue their treatment at all. Now, we know IVF is a physically demanding and incredibly emotionally fraught process. IVF cycles are more likely to be unsuccessful than successful. Apricity boasted of an above-average success rate of 46%. So, as IVF.net stated, for hundreds of couples, Apricity's closure was more than a logistical hurdle. It was a devastating emotional blow. But even worse, families who'd signed up with Apricity were not offered the peace of mind that a regulator provides, because Apricity is not regulated. It was not regulated. It was an unlicensed online clinic. That means that the health and advice on offer could have been complete rubbish, could have been backed by no expert knowledge at all. And these online services are expanding in scope and number. The HFEA has warned that for some time a range of activities marketed as fertility treatment have taken place outside of regulated licensed clinics in a variety of settings, including wellness clinics. More recently, they say the fertility market has had to start to move online in settings which are outside of the regulated scheme. More people are accessing fertility market and fertility treatments than ever before, and particularly in this way, Madam Deputy Speaker. And though the HFEA can't put an exact number on this precisely because such services fall outside of their regulatory scope, with 73% of IVF cycles being funded privately, it's likely to be a very large proportion. So in recognition of this changing landscape and with patient trust and safety in mind, the HFEA recommended in 2023 that the 1990 HFEA Act should be revised to accommodate developments in the way fertility services are provided. I know that health ministers have met with the chair of HFEA to discuss updating the regulatory regime around fertility treatment, but this change will require primary legislation. I've had no firm commitment that the government is seeking a change in the law, but the case of Apricity has underscored the urgent need to safeguard their patients' right to their data, their eggs and their sperm. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a classic case of regulation just not keeping pace with modern life. It's criminal that organisations that are in the business of making dreams come true can just disappear, along with people's money and their hopes of starting a family. Now, the Chancellor has made it clear that she's no fan of regulators, but in the field of medical treatment, and specifically the process of IVF, a strong regulatory regime is absolutely vital to ensuring confidence and security. So I'd urge ministers and members from across the House to support my bill, to bring in the recommendations of the HFEA, and to support women and families at one of the most important stages of their lives.
Yeah.
Mr. Kruger. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that opinion say aye? Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Madam Deputy Speaker, it will be Katie Lamb, Liz Jarvis, Afra Brandreth, Sir Ashley Fox, Joe Robertson, Christine Jardine, Jim Shannon, Sarah Champion, Florence Eshelami, Samantha Niblett, Wendy Morton and myself, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Dame Caroline Dinage.
Human Fertilisation and Embryology Regulation Bill.
Second reading what day?
12th of September.
12th of September. I now come to motion number 2 on business of the House. Today, Minister to move. Formally. The question is as on the order papers. May that opinion say aye. Aye. On the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the first Opposition Day motion in the name of the Leader of the Opposition on Welfare. I inform the House that Mr Speaker has not selected any amendments, and I call the Shadow Secretary of State, Helen Whately, to move. Helen Whately.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. All of us have to make difficult choices in life about what we can afford. For many of us here, if we're fortunate, one of those choices will have been the number of children we have. We may wish that such an important decision should not be tainted by something as unromantic as money, but that is the hard fact of the matter. Children are wonderful, and I say that as the mum of 3 teenagers. But bringing them up is an expensive business. As Conservatives, we believe in the importance of family, in personal responsibility, fairness, and in living within our means, for each of us as families and as a society. And that is why today we are calling on all MPs here to affirm our commitment to a policy which reflects those principles. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me take a step back for a moment and reflect on the situation we are in as a country. We have 28 million people in Britain who are now working to pay the wages, benefits and pensions of 28 million others. More than half of all households received more in benefits and benefits in kind than they paid in taxes. To spell that out, more people are net recipients than net contributors. That's right now. And every day that passes, spending on benefits is going up and up. Health and disability benefits alone are set to hit 100 billion by the end of the decade. That is more than we spend on defence, on education and on policing. While it may seem kind to spend more on welfare, it's not. It's not kind those trapped in the welfare system and written off to a lifetime on benefits. In a moment. And as we embark on a doom loop of uncontrolled spending, higher taxes, struggling businesses, entrepreneurial exodus, rising unemployment, and then more people out of work and on benefits, it's not kind to those who lose their jobs and their incomes in that cycle of misery. And if the moment comes that we can't afford even to provide welfare to those in desperate need, then it most definitely will not be kind to them, the very people our welfare safety net is meant to be there for. I'm happy to give way to the
Grateful to the Shadow Minister for giving way. She talks about kindness, and does she agree, therefore, with the Children's Commissioner for England, who said children in England are now living in Dickensian levels of poverty, and a principal element of that is the 2-child cap? What element of kindness does she see present in that unfairness?
I don't agree with the honourable member, and I'm coming to talk about poverty in a moment, so if he will just hold on a moment, he will hear my view on that point. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a ticking time bomb. If we don't solve this problem, our economy will collapse. Yet opposite me sit members of this Labour government who have just shown us, with the welfare chaos of the last couple of weeks, that they will not, indeed cannot, fix this. In fact, they're just making it worse. Honourable members, if you cast your mind back to early 2020, the party opposite were in the midst of a leadership election. The now Prime Minister made a clear and unequivocal commitment to scrap punitive sanctions, the 2-child limit and the benefits cap, his words. Then, once he secured the leadership of the Labour Party and the election neared, he changed that tune. He said Labour were not going to abolish the 2-child limit. He acknowledged the need to take tough decisions and not to make unfunded spending promises, and on this we can agree. But saying that you will take tough decisions is not the same as actually taking them. Take, for example, the Universal Credit and PIP Bill, now just called the Universal Credit Bill, which they voted through last week. It was meant to save £5 billion. Then the first U-turn brought that down to £2 billion. Then the next U-turn brought it down to, well, the minister on the front bench at the time couldn't tell us, but the consensus is that it will now cost the taxpayer around £100 million cost the taxpayer? I will happily give way to my...
My honourable friend's making a powerful speech, and would she agree that as a result of that bill, one of the things that is most shocking is that in due course it will actually pay more to be on welfare than to work full-time at the minimum wage?
Well, my right honourable friend makes a very important point about the problem of a welfare trap. When people find themselves in a situation, they would be better off on benefits and indeed instead working full time on the minimum wage. I will make a little progress and I'll be happy to give way to the honourable lady. As I was just saying, so last week's welfare fiasco saw a bill that was meant to save money become a bill that costs money. We also have had the fiasco of the winter fuel payments cut, where we saw tough talk rode back from, because in fact taking money from low-income pensioners is not the way to make savings. And now here we are debating the future of the two-child limit, which Cabinet Ministers, including the Prime Minister, have indicated is the next tough choice that they are not going to make.
Will the honourable lady give way?
I'm happy to give way to my...
And I need to her for giving way. She's been talking a lot about tough choices. Does she agree with me that families that are in work make tough choices every single day about what they can afford and how they spend their money? Does she agree that those who receive benefits should really have to make the same tough choices?
My right honourable friend makes a very important point, and thoughtfully, it's exactly that many families, whether they are living off benefits or in work, would like to have more children but have to make these difficult choices about what they can afford, and this is a point about fairness. Now, I know many of the honourable members opposite passionately believe that the limit should go, and they will make arguments today about child poverty, as if they are the only ones who care about that. For the avoidance of doubt, that is not true. Our difference of opinion is about what to do about it. But the Prime Minister, I think all of us are lost to know what he believes in. By contrast, we know what we believe in. We know why we're here. And that's why we have brought forward this debate today on the two-child limit. Because somebody has to make the case for fiscal responsibility, for living within our means, for fairness, for making sure work pays, and for keeping the two-child cap. Now, I want to be clear, in one moment, I want to be clear. We all, including us on this side of the House, want children to have the best start in life possible. And let's also be clear about what the two-child limit actually is, because I note that some members from other parties are confused. The two-child limit restricts the amount of additional universal credit that families receive for having children to the first 2 children only, with some sensible exceptions, like twins and non-consensual conception. The cap does not apply to child benefit, which is available to all families with incomes of up to £80,000 for every child, regardless of the number of children in a family. I'm happy to give away to my right honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. I'm proud to be a member of the party of Wilberforce and Shaftesbury and Disraeli, who all understood that it's essential to free people from need, and the state in that effort can be a force for good. But in freeing people from need, we shouldn't limit them to a life of dependency. And it's entirely possible to believe that whilst welfare can be a force for good, so can personal responsibility. And responsibility means making the kind of choices that she set out.
I couldn't put it better than my right honourable friend. I thank him for the intervention. Madam Deputy Speaker, we know bringing up children is expensive and important. When working couples are having to make tough decisions about whether they can afford to start a family in the first place, they should not be made to pay more in taxes to fund their neighbour to have a 3rd, 4th or 5th child. If you're in a job, don't get paid more just because you have another child. And if we're worried about people getting caught in a benefits trap where it pays more to be on welfare than in work, how much worse would it be with neither the two-child benefit nor the benefits cap? Because it means benefits increased by thousands. And when I say thousands, the House of Commons Library has told me that a family with 5 children would get more than £10,000 extra a year, and a family with 8 children would get more than £20,000 extra a year. That's more than the after-tax income of someone working working full-time on the minimum wage. I will indeed give way to the Honourable Lady.
Giving way. And does she seriously believe that any families out there, anywhere in the country, are going to take seriously the Conservative Party lecturing us on personal and fiscal responsibility when this is the party that not only brought the economy to its knees through the uncosted promises of Liz Truss's government, but also partied in the back garden of Number 10 when the rest of us were under COVID restrictions?
I mean, if I could just take the Honourable Lady back a little bit, she might remember when we came into office in 2010 and we had to bring down the deficit year after year to get the country's finances under control. Madam Deputy Speaker, giving children the best start in life is not as simple as handing out more money. It's about giving parents the community support they need as they encounter the challenges of bringing up a child, which is why we launched the Family Hubs. It's about education, but school teachers around the country are being let go. It's about growing up in a household with someone in work, but people around the country are being made redundant because of their Chancellor's jobs tax. Now, I know I won't win over everyone here with my argument. For instance, I don't expect to convince the 4 remaining Reform MPs, because their leader has said he would remove the 2-child limit. The Honourable Member for Clacton believes that's the right thing to do, and he said he's not finished yet on benefits giveaways. But asking the taxpayer for ever more in taxes to pay for their neighbours' benefits is not the right thing to do. The country cannot afford this. Taxpayers cannot afford this. Future generations cannot afford this. The Prime Minister, the Chancellor, Cabinet Ministers have been unable to rule out more tax rises this autumn. Businesses, working people, pensioners, savers, homeowners, whose pocket is going to be picked next? Last week, the OBR warned that the UK's finances are in a very vulnerable position. Now more than ever, we need the government to take the tough decisions, but will they? I know Labour backbenchers are itching to vote to scrap the limit, but where is the government on this? Will they take the position of the Prime Minister in 2020, in 2024, or now? Or will they have to abstain because they just don't know? Madam Deputy Speaker, soon we will see. Only the Conservatives understand the importance of personal responsibility, fairness and living within our means. Labour, Lib Dems, SNP, Greens, Reform all voted for more welfare spending last week. Will they do the same today? Or will they vote with us to back the people getting up every morning, going out to work, doing the hard yards, making the hard choices and working hard to build our country?
As on the order paper, and I call the Minister, Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, there we have it. As ever, all politics, no economics. They come to this House not to talk about the people of this country, but themselves, Madam Deputy Speaker. And in March, we found out the truth of the Tory record on child poverty, which is highly relevant to their motion today. From 2010 to 2024, the number of poor children skyrocketed by nearly 1 million. 14 years in office, and they left us 4.5 million of our children growing up without the ability to make ends meet. This, Madam Deputy Speaker, is what Tory governments do. Just like in the years from 1979 to 1997, where child poverty more than doubled, leaving 4.2 million children in relative poverty. Madam Deputy Speaker, the party opposite can come to this House defending the failures of the last Tory government as many times as they like, as their motion does today. Every single time we will remind them of their record. And I'll give way to the honourable gentleman if he apologises to the 4.5 million children of in this country growing up in poverty.
The Minister and members opposite are in absolute denial of the state of the country. They brought in with growth as their #1 mission, and what have they done? They brought growth to an absolute shuddering halt. They have done what every Labour government does, which is it increases unemployment. Who does that hurt the most? The poorest. Who does it hurt most from an age point of view? The young. 45% was the increase in youth unemployment, a scar on this country that the last government, Labour government, left. And it was this side of the House that outgrew Germany, outgrew France, outgrew Japan and outgrew Italy over the 14 years we were in power. She should be ashamed of her record, even though it's only 12 months old.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do thank the honourable gentleman for that lengthy intervention, and I regret that he does not feel the need to look his own record in the face, and more than anything, to have something to say to the 4.5 million children in this country without the means to make ends meet. I regret that very deeply. Emergency food parcels distributed by Trussell food banks have increased by 164% over the last 10 years, and 1.1 million children were living in households that went to a food bank in the last 12 months. Madam Deputy Speaker, in this country today we've got more food banks than police stations. Are they proud of that record? I hope not. Nobody in this country should be begging. No child should face the indignity of that, and the consequences are very serious. Over 80% of parents say they struggle to get basic support, like a GP appointment or to see a health visitor. And schools are in an attendance crisis, with 1 in 5 kids now missing a day, a fortnight or more, and worse for poor kids. That is their record. These failures for our children will echo down the years and will turn up in our nation's life expectancy, the benefits bill they say they care about, and worst of all, in the sense of hopelessness that far too many people in this country now have. So does the Conservative opposition have a response to their record? As we've already heard, no, they do not. Have they apologised to families in the UK? As we've heard, no, they do not. Have they reflected on their record? As we've heard, no, they do not. No, they bring a motion to this House to do none of the above, but to agree with a Tory party policy from 10 years ago. They are the same Conservative party that created the mess that we are in now, and they have no regrets. Their motion, in a moment, their motion talks of a benefits trap, and she just repeated that. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, they are going to be awfully cross when they find out who spent £3 billion on the universal credit system they now say traps people into poverty. They promised universal credit would get people into work. Instead, it pushed people into incapacity benefits. I'll give way to them.
I thank the Minister for giving way, but I just gently say to her, her and her backbench colleagues do not have a monopoly on talking about poverty. Because if she really cared about poverty, she would not have allowed a policy to be brought before this House last week before changing it that put 150,000 extra children into poverty. If she genuinely believed in poverty, why is she still standing at that dispatch box as a minister? Because she should have resigned for putting more children into poverty under her proposals.
Righteous indignation now.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't believe for a moment that people in the Labour Party are the only people that care about poverty in this country. I know former members of this House who were dispensed from their duty as a Conservative Member of Parliament by previous Prime Ministers, others who've been in this House over many years from different parties have cared about policy. I don't think it's just the Labour Party who cares. I just think we should deal with facts in this place, and I'm merely repeating, for the benefit of the House, what the record of the Conservative government was on poverty. And I would say to him, I'm going to cover the details of the Child Poverty Task Force in my speech. At any point, if he wishes to make representations to the task force of ministers dealing with child poverty in this country, I will happily receive his representations. So let me just make a little more progress, if I may. Their motion speaks of a benefits culture, and I simply ask the party opposite this: who made that culture happen? Who was it who was in charge for the past decade and a half? Either the last Tory government was powerless to stop that culture being created, or they were responsible for it. So which is it? And I think, Madam Deputy Speaker, until the party opposite can see the consequences of their own time in office, which they clearly cannot, and accept the damage they did, no one will hear a single word that they say. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are people in this country who do deserve a hearing. The children and young people who've experienced childhood under the last Tory government. And as has already been mentioned by a member opposite, last week we heard from the Children's Commissioner for England, which I just might point out, she was appointed under the Conservatives, that the Children's Commissioner for England, on her work capturing the opinions of children who've grown up in poverty thanks to the policies espoused by members opposite. We heard that children think free breakfast clubs, I will give way to
She's making an important speech, and many of us will agree with it on this side. My honourable friend will be aware, will she not, that 59% of families who have more than 2 children on universal credit are in work. And that's far from the feckless parent caricature that we've heard today from the Conservatives. And more importantly, does she agree with me that actually it's the children that should come first, and because the children should come first, we should urgently scrap the 2-child cap as quickly as possible?
Deputy Speaker, and I thank my friend for that intervention. As he rightly points out, in the speech that we've heard from the Shadow Minister, yet again we hear from a Tory party that only wants to divide people, only wants to ignore the facts in favour of dividing people in this country, as they did for many years when they were in government. That is not what people want. People want this country to move forward together. In a moment, I just want to mention a few of the contributions of the Children's Commissioner for England, and then I'll give way further. We heard from the Children's Commissioner for England that children think that free breakfast clubs and school meals are important. That's why we've begun the rollout of free breakfast clubs in all primary schools, and last month we announced the expansion of free school meals to all on universal credit, lifting 100,000 children out of poverty by the end of this Parliament. Young people told the Commissioner about how they absorb their parents' money worries. One 16-year-old girl said, "I worry about money quite a lot. I see myself as quite approachable to my mum, so my mum will tell me absolutely everything. Children need to grow up without that stress. So we've introduced the fair repayment rate for universal credit households so that a debt to the government doesn't keep families poor, which will help 700,000 households with children." I'll give way to
I'm mindful of 2 of her predecessors in Birkenhead, actually. The first F.E. Smith, the great Tory, who talked about all must have prizes, and sometimes it feels in our modern Britain that all must have state support. And the second, the late Frank Field, much regarded and revered in this House for his honesty about welfare reform. Now, she's right, the successive governments have failed to grasp this nettle. But the truth is the relationship between the state and the individual has changed over time. And we need a welfare system that focuses support on those in the greatest need. She surely believes that, and that does require bold welfare reform. Is she up for bold welfare reform or not?
Minister. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the honourable gentleman for
be there for you. You try to break mine. It isn't asking for a lot for an apology, or making me feel like I kill you if I try to leave. You said you never fall in love again because of me, and you moved on immediately. But I wish you the best for the rest of your life. Felt sorry for you when I looked in your eyes, but I need to confess, I told you a lie when I said you were the love of my life, the love of my life. So you found her, now go fall in love, just like we were. If I ever was, it's not my fault. I did what I could, you made it so hard. I can't know your words. Thought I was depressed or losing my mind. My stomach upset almost all of the time. After I left, it was obvious why. Because for you, were the love of my life, but you were not mine. You moved on, you moved
trailhead full of zombies. I met a strange lady, she made me nervous. She took me in and gave me breakfast. And she said, do you come from a land down under, where women glow and men plunder? Can't you hear the thunder? You better run, you better take cover. Buying bread from a man in Brazil. He was 6'4" and full of muscle. I said, do you speak in my language? He just smiled and gave me a Vegemite sandwich. And he said, do you come from a land down under, where women glow and men plunder? Can't you hear the thunder? You better run, you better take cover. Lying down in Bombay, with his life job and not much to say. I said to the man who tried to tempt me, because I come from the land of plenty. He said, do you come from a land down under, where women glow and men plunder? Can't you hear the thunder? You better run, you better take cover. Do you come from a land down under, where women glow and men plunder? Can't you hear the thunder? You better run, you better take cover.
Well, I'm riding down the road trying to loosen my load. I got 7 women on my mind. For the one to own me, 2 freedom. Well, who am I to keep you down? It's all